Hey guys, tonight we walk the polished, echoing halls of the Palace of Versailles, June 1667. The sun not yet up, but every marble surface flickering with torchlight. Your shoes are soft, silent, nearly lost in the rush of slippered feet on polished floors. Somewhere nearby, the musk of lavender water tries unsuccessfully to mask the underlying tang of sweat, candle smoke, and the slightly alarming odor of birth. Servants hover with silver trays, eyes darting, voices hushed to near silence. Tonight, you're not an honored guest. You're one of the invisible ones, summoned after dusk, sworn to secrecy, never to speak of what's about to unfold behind the closed door of a royal mistress's chamber. You can practically feel the tension pressing in from the gilded walls, every surface holding secrets. It's the summer of 1667 in the court of Louis XIV. Yes, the Sun King, with the world's most legendary hair and a collection of mistresses longer than your to-do list. There are rules here, rigid as the stays in your borrowed corset. Some people have names, others have only numbers, and tonight it's best to forget both. You probably won't survive this, if you so much as breathe the wrong way. Court life is a lot less let them eat cake and a lot more let them see nothing. If you think this is dramatic, wait till you see what happens when a royal baby comes along, and no one is supposed to know about it. Smell that? That's the scent of secrets, musk, candle wax, and the sharp tang of anxiety. Hear the quick tap of nervous heels, the creak of a door opening just a fraction. History is happening in the dark. If you love secrets and scandal, you're in the right place. Drop your city and local time below. Tell us if you had to hide a royal baby tonight. Where would you stash them? Would you dare? Let's tuck in and lift the velvet curtain on secret royal births. Hidden heirs no one wanted. You'll never look at a nursery rhyme the same way again. The story begins with your hand on a heavy carved doorknob, a signal from the chamberlain, a nod from a stone-faced matron in black. You enter the private apartments, away from the mirrored halls and painted ceilings, into a world where time is marked not by hours, but by the rhythm of pain, breath, and the cautious whispers of women trying to keep a secret bigger than themselves. A royal mistress is in labor. You don't know her real name. Nobody uses real names in the service. But you know she is important enough to command a room full of skilled midwives, forbidden to speak to one another, except in the most necessary terms. The queen is somewhere else, safely asleep, or pretending to be. The king? Not present, not even in the wing, but his absence is a presence in itself, like a shadow that stretches around every gilded door. You are handed a cloth, told to fetch water, light more candles. Keep your eyes down. The mistress is pale, gritting her teeth, her nails digging furrows into the silken sheets. The midwife, older than anyone you've seen in this place, snaps her fingers for hot towels and wine. It is not a night for ceremony, but for survival. You hear one maid mutter, "It's not supposed to happen here, not like this." You pretend not to hear. In the palace, every ear is a threat, every word a possible end to someone's future, or your own. Why all this secrecy? Why the rush? The locked doors, the double shift of guards who turn their faces away and let no one pass. It's simple. In 1667, France is ruled by appearances, and nothing upsets the delicate balance of power like an unexpected child. The king is allowed mistresses, encouraged, even if you ask the right courtiers. But their children, those are another matter. An open secret is still a secret, and the fewer witnesses, the safer for everyone involved. Time seems to slow. You watch as the mistress fights through contractions. Teeth bared, voice low, no one soothes her. One midwife leans close, whispering, "It must be quick." Another adjusts the windows, letting in as little light as possible. Outside, the palace gardens are silent, dew on every blade of grass, the moon hiding behind clouds. Inside, the only sounds are labored breathing, the muted clink of glass, the occasional prayer muttered in Latin or bad French. At some point, a physician arrives. He wears no wig, no powdered face. This is not a public event, not a court spectacle. He examines the mistress with the clinical coldness of a man used to unpleasant tasks. He does not look at you, nor anyone else, as if the fewer people he acknowledges, the less he might be implicated later. His job is to make sure the child is born alive, and then if the rumors are true, to make it disappear. And oh, the rumors. In the court of Louis XIV, gossip is oxygen. You hear whispers in the kitchens, in the laundry rooms, in the echoing galleries. This one might be the king's true heir, the one nobody wants, or maybe just another mouth to feed. One more problem for the king's fixer to handle. Some say that if the child is a boy, he will be smuggled away to a monastery, raised with the knowledge that his blood is royal, but his life is not. If a girl, she might be fostered by a noble family, never acknowledged, but never entirely forgotten. A secret dowry, a marriage arranged, a discreet packet of gold. Sometimes, they say, the babies don't survive at all. But you're here now, a silent observer, pretending to be invisible as the moment comes. The mistress cries out, her face twisted in pain, sweat darkening her brow. You find yourself gripping the edge of a side table, wishing for anything else, except perhaps to be in her place. With a final scream, the baby arrives, wet and wriggling, already red-faced and loud. For a moment, time stops. The midwife examines the infant. A boy, she murmurs, so quietly that you almost miss it. Everything changes in that instant. The physician nods curtly, signaling to one of the maids, who wraps the baby tight and turns her back to the rest of the room. The mistress is already drifting into exhausted sleep, the pain of birth traded for the numbness of defeat. No celebration, no cheers, no proud father bursting through the doors with cigars and congratulations. Instead, a new layer of secrecy falls over the room. You realize your job isn't done, not by a long shot. You help strip the bed, burn the soiled linens in the fireplace, and mop the floor with lavender water until the sharp, metallic scent of blood is almost gone. You help the other servants scrub every surface, remove every clue, and check for witnesses. There are protocols for this. You never realized how much effort goes into pretending nothing happened. A tray is brought in with broth for the mistress, though she barely touches it. Someone hands her a clean nightgown, smoothing her hair, but there is no warmth in the gesture. She turns her face to the wall, and you see a tear slip down her cheek. You wonder what will become of her once beloved, now disposable, depending on how the king feels tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, the infant is passed to the physician, who swaddles him so tightly you worry he can't breathe. The doctor exchanges a look with the matron, one that says everything and nothing. A second door opens, almost invisible in the panelling, and a shadowy figure steps in. You recognize the king's fixer, a man with a face so bland you'd forget him if you tried. He takes the baby, nods once, and is gone. The door clicks shut behind him. You can feel the air change, the tension easing just slightly. The worst is over, for now. But for the baby, the night is just beginning. You imagine the journey ahead, a carriage waiting in a courtyard, horses muffled to silence. A bundle slipped into the arms of a waiting woman somewhere outside the city. Maybe the child will grow up knowing something is missing. Or maybe he'll believe the lie, become a priest, a soldier, or a footman in another rich man's house. Maybe on some future night, a king will need an heir, and remember the baby he once had hidden away. But tonight, you're part of history. History no one will ever acknowledge. You're the hands that cleaned the room, the eyes that saw too much. You're trusted because you are invisible, and you understand this is how secrets survive. Not because people are good at hiding them, but because people are even better at pretending nothing happened. As you tiptoe out of the chamber, the palace is still dark, but the sky outside is starting to pale. You slip down a servant's staircase, careful not to wake anyone, careful not to leave any trace. In the kitchens, you hear the first stirrings of the day, pots banging, bread baking, someone humming a tune that was probably scandalous 50 years ago. You don't speak of the night, not even when another maid gives you a knowing look. It's safer that way. There are stories of what happens to those who talk exile. If you're lucky, something much worse if you're not. In Louis XIV's France, the only thing more dangerous than being the king's secret child is being the one who let the secret slip. Later, you pass by the queen's apartments. Everything is calm, ordinary, maids brushing out hair, courtiers discussing the day's schedule, the scent of roses wafting from a freshly arranged bouquet. If anyone suspects what happened in the night, they give no sign. The machinery of the court grinds on, all gears and gilding, covering over the cracks with a fresh coat of paint. But as you glance out a high window at the sun rising over the gardens, you wonder how many other babies have come into the world this way. Born in shadow, erased by sunrise. How many secrets hide behind those polished mirrors and painted ceilings? You think about the infant, swaddled tight, carried away, and you know that this is just one story among thousands. A secret birth, a hidden heir, a life that will shape history or disappear from it entirely. You wonder if, centuries from now, someone will walk these same halls and sense what you did. The weight of all those hidden stories pressing down, whispering from behind every door. Will they know about the silent chamber, the forbidden cries, the hurried footsteps in the night? Will they realize that history is built not just on the stories we tell, but on the ones we're desperate to conceal? You straighten your apron, hide your trembling hands, and step back into the waking world. The palace comes alive around you. Cooks shouting, dogs barking, courtiers arguing over breakfast. It's almost as if nothing happened at all. But you know the truth, and in the secret language of survivors, you keep that truth locked away. Another invisible thread in the tapestry of royal life. A life built on secrets, silences, and the babies no one was ever supposed to want. It turns out royal secrets don't take holidays, least of all in the glittering halls of Versailles, where golden light floods through towering windows, and every inch of marble echoes with the footsteps of ambition. Now you glide through the corridors a little more cautiously, still haunted by the ghosts of the last scandal you survived. This time, your path leads not to the king or his overt mistresses, but to a subtler, stickier web of rumour. Here, in the waning years of the 18th century, you hear a name whispered that makes even seasoned servants arch an eyebrow. Marie Antoinette, the heir at Versailles, is always thick with the scent of beeswax, orange blossom, and expensive secrets. It's 85 years before the Revolution, years before anyone's head would roll for saying the wrong thing. Marie Antoinette, the Austrian queen, with her famously tall hair and famously short patience for French etiquette, has grown tired of formality. She spends her hours in her private gardens, tending roses, chatting with ladies in waiting, and so rumour claims, sneaking glances at a certain handsome Swede. His name is Count Axel von Fersen, and if you believe the palace staff, he's everywhere. Marie Antoinette is, and often where she isn't supposed to be. You, practical as ever, know that royal gossip is like Paris rain, always falling, never quite clean. Still, something feels different about these rumours. You see it in the nervous energy of the chambermaids, the way letters disappear from desks, the way Marie's favourite lady-in-waiting never lets the queen out of sight for more than a minute. One afternoon, as you're polishing the silver in a sunlit alcove, you overhear a conversation that makes you pause mid-buff. Two maids lean close, voices lowered. "Did you see the boy again?" the younger one asks, her eyes darting down the hall. The one with the black hair, the other shrugs, but her fingers twist the corner of her apron. "He was in the Queen's rooms yesterday. Not one of ours. No one knows where he came from." Now there's nothing unusual about children in Versailles. There are royal heirs, pages, stable boys, the occasional lost noble's child. But this boy, the staff says, is different. His skin is olive-toned, his eyes wide and dark, his hair not powdered, but thick and unruly. Some say he was left on the palace steps. Others insist he arrived with a foreign governess, vanished as soon as she delivered him, and some, bolder still, say he's the flesh and blood evidence of a scandal the Queen will take to her grave. You do your best to mind your own business. Still, you notice things. The boy is always present at odd hours, vanishing before dawn, appearing at dusk. He's fed from the Queen's own kitchens, but never sits with the other palace children. His clothes are fine, but not royal, good fabric, careful mending. One evening, you catch a glimpse of him, trailing after Count Fersen in the garden, close enough to seem like family, distant enough to escape notice. Marie Antoinette herself has changed too. She spends more time behind closed doors, her laughter quieter, her silence is longer. The court whispers that she is tired, unwell, perhaps grieving the endless pressure to produce sons for France. But some, those with sharper eyes, notice how she watches the mysterious boy, her expressions softening, her guard slipping. Once, when she thinks she's alone, you see her kneel beside him, straightening his jacket, brushing hair from his forehead. It's a gesture too intimate for a servant, too loving for a stranger. Of course, in Versailles, Nothing escapes the net of gossip. Soon, rumours spread like spilled wine. Some say the boy is the child of a palace musician, adopted out of charity. Others claim he's a lost cousin from Vienna, here for his education. But the juiciest theory, the one that keeps the courtiers awake at night, is that he is the secret love child of Marie Antoinette and Count Fersen. You're not sure what to believe. You've seen the Queen's official children, the Dauphin, pale and sickly, the little princess, always followed by a parade of nannies and tutors. They live their lives in the open, their every move scrutinized. This boy, by contrast, lives in the shadows, slipping through service corridors, eating his meals in hidden corners, vanishing for days at a time. And yet, you can't help but notice how he fits nowhere and everywhere. He is comfortable with servants, but never truly one of them. He has the bearing of a noble, but none of the privileges. Sometimes, late, light, you hear him playing quietly on a spinet in the music room, fingers flying over the keys with skill far beyond his years. You ask yourself, who teaches a child like that? Who keeps him close, yet always out of sight? Then there are the gifts. Small things, tucked into the boy's pockets. A silk handkerchief embroidered with a royal monogram, a silver whistle shaped like a wolf, a set of paints rumoured to have been imported from Vienna. No one ever sees who gives them, but they always appear after the Queen has been in a particularly pensive mood. The boy himself is quiet, wary, polite in a way that comes from always watching your back. When you cross paths in the corridor, he nods gravely, eyes flicking over your face as if weighing whether you can be trusted. Once, when you offer him a slice of honeyed bread, he takes it with a soft merci and a smile that is so familiar, so heartbreakingly royal, that for a moment you understand all the whispers. It's not long before the court's paranoia reaches a boiling point. The Queen's enemies, never in short supply, begin to use the boy as ammunition. Anonymous letters appear in the king's study, hinting at treason, adultery, betrayal. The Austrian ambassador is questioned, his answers carefully recorded. Count Fersen is watched more closely, his comings and goings timed to the minute. The boy vanishes for a week, then reappears as if nothing has happened. The palace is on edge, every servant treading lightly, every noble plotting their next move. But it is the revolution, not the rumours, that will change everything. As 1789 dawns, the world Marie Antoinette has tried so hard to control begins to unravel. The Bastille falls, the mob marches, and suddenly, secrecy is a luxury no one can afford. You watch as the Queen's circle shrinks, her allies flee, and her face grows harder with each passing day. The boy, always quick to sense danger, disappears one last time. Some say he was spirited away to Vienna, others that he found refuge with Count Fersen's family in Sweden. The most fanciful stories claim he died in the chaos, buried in a pauper's grave, his royal blood unknown even to those who mourned him. You never see him again, but sometimes you hear the faintest echo of his music drifting through the abandoned palace, the notes lingering in the air long after the rooms have emptied. When the Queen is finally arrested, you find yourself pressed into service in the Tuileries, the palace that has become her gilded prison. Marie Antoinette is thinner now, shadows under her eyes, her hands constantly twisting a handkerchief. Sometimes she asks after the boy, her words disguised as idle questions about the staff. You answer with the only thing you can offer, silence. It is not until years later, long after the guillotine has fallen silent, that you hear another rumour. A young man with royal features and a talent for music is spotted in Vienna, living quietly, never claiming a name. Some say he is a bastard. Others whisper that he is a prince in exile, content to let the world forget. For you, it is just another secret in a life full of them, a story half told, a truth lost in the noise of revolution. You wonder, sometimes, if the boy ever understood who he was, or if he was happier not knowing. Perhaps, like so many royal bastards, he learned that sometimes the best way to survive is to slip into the crowd and become someone else. Versailles itself stands empty now, its halls stripped of gold, its mirrors reflecting only dust and memories. You walk the corridors one last time, listening for footsteps that never come, the scent of orange blossoms replaced by the chill of abandonment. And yet you cannot help but feel that, somewhere out there, the Queen's lost child still walks, neither prince nor pauper, but something in between, a living echo of a love the world tried to erase, a reminder that not every secret can be buried. Sometimes, as you pass the spot where you first saw him, you leave a crumb of bread, a token for the ghosts of Versailles. It's a small act of rebellion, a nod to the children whose lives are shaped by the whims of power and the cruelties of fate. You know their stories matter, even if history pretends they don't. And as the candle gutters out, you realize that some secrets are meant to be kept, not out of shame, but out of mercy. After all, in a world where survival means never being truly seen, perhaps the greatest gift you can offer is to let the lost remain lost, at least for tonight. You've gotten pretty good at slipping between worlds, the public and the private, the gold and the grime, the officially recognized and the quietly ignored. But nothing prepares you for the odd melancholy that comes with entering a foreign court, far from Paris and London, with nothing to shield you but your wit and a healthy respect for locked doors. Tonight, you find yourself in Parma, northern Italy, in the early 1800s, tiptoeing across centuries and continents to witness the strange, secretive existence of Napoleon's illegitimate son. The air here is different, thick with the scent of roasting chestnuts and damp stone. The city is quiet at night, quieter still in the mansion, at the edge of town, where the exiled Maria Wallowiska lives, with her young boy, Aleksandra. She is Polish, beautiful, and has the weary look of someone who has learned to smile without ever showing her teeth. Her servants are fiercely loyal, and not just because she pays them well. Everyone knows, or thinks they know, who Aleksandra's father is. Everyone pretends it doesn't matter. You find your place in the kitchen, rolling dough for breakfast pastries, while the household murmurs in the language of secrets. "He has his father's eyes," says the housekeeper, glancing furtively over her shoulder. "But he's nothing like the Corsican." The Corsican is how they refer to Napoleon, never the emperor, not in exile, not now. The war is over, the empire is shattered, but for Aleksandra, the future is just beginning. You see him in the mornings, a wiry boy with a soldier's straight posture and a scholar's gaze. Maria drills him in languages, French, Italian, Polish, even a little German for good measure. She wants him to be able to blend in anywhere, a master of disguise who can vanish into any city. "You must never claim a name," she warns, her fingers trembling just a little as she straightens his collar. "But you must always know who you are." There is love in her touch and fear in her voice. Aleksandra's days are a careful choreography. In the mornings, he recites Latin verses, learns chess strategies, and practices fencing in the walled garden. By noon, he's inside again, reading history books and learning how to calculate accounts. Maria insists that a man should always know where his money comes from and where it goes. In the afternoons, he rides with a retired officer who teaches him to sit a horse like a prince, but bow his head like a servant. All the while, Maria watches from a distance, never letting him out of her sight for too long. You sometimes catch a glimmer of the boy's spirit, a loud laugh during a fencing match, a daring leap from the kitchen stairs, a smile that for just a moment erases the lines of worry from his mother's face. But then he remembers himself, and the mask comes back down. You're amazed by how much weight such a young child can carry. He knows that any day, a stranger could arrive with news from France, and everything could change in an instant. At least once a month, Maria receives a letter in a script she recognizes, but never shows to the staff. She reads it in private, her hands trembling, her lips pressed thin. Sometimes she cries, other times she laughs, but the sound is brittle, like glass about to shatter. Afterward, she holds Aleksandra close and whispers, "You must be brave. Your father was brave, and you must be too." It's the kind of reassurance that feels like a warning. And the boy is brave, though not in the way people expect. He listens carefully to adult conversations, learning to pick out useful truths from the fog of rumor. He practices walking quietly, so he can hear what the grown-ups say when they think he isn't listening. Once, you catch him hiding behind a velvet curtain as Maria's lawyer discusses inheritance and discretion in hushed tones. Alexandra's eyes are wide, not afraid, but hungry for knowledge. You have to admit, the kid's got survival instincts that would make a street cat jealous. There's a kind of freedom in exile, if you squint hard enough. In Parma, Aleksandra is neither prince nor pauper, just a boy who gets to be both, depending on who's looking. At times you see him running wild in the orchards, chasing chickens and climbing trees with the village boys. At others you find him staring at a faded portrait of Napoleon, eyes narrowed as if trying to puzzle out a code in the painted lines of that famous brooding face. Of course, even in exile, danger lurks. There are visitors, strange men who come late at night, never using their real names, always carrying gifts. Sometimes, after one of these visits, Maria is tense for days, barking orders and double-checking locks. The cook complains about the waste, but everyone understands the less you know, the safer you are. It isn't long before rumors start to swirl. One morning, you overhear a heated conversation between the local priest and Maria in the courtyard. He should be baptized as Walewski, the priest insists. No one will question it. Maria's voice is icy. Everyone will question it. That's the problem. She turns on her heel and marches back inside. Alexander trailing behind her, looking over his shoulder as if expecting the world to swallow him whole. Sometimes, you wonder how much the boy really understands. Is he haunted by his father's legend, or does he simply want a chance to be a child? Does he dream of returning to France, or would he rather stay here, hidden in the shadow of a broken empire? You can't say for sure, but you notice he is always listening, always learning, always waiting. One crisp evening, you find yourself assigned to the main salon, where Maria is hosting a handful of exiled French officers. The room is smoky with pipe tobacco and heavy with nostalgia. They speak of Paris, of old campaigns, of the glory days when Napoleon's armies marched from Cairo to Moscow. Alexander sits quietly at his mother's feet, his eyes darting from face to face, soaking up every word. When someone asks him what he wants to be when he grows up, he looks them dead in the eye and says, "I want to be free." The adults laugh, but you notice Maria's hand tighten on his shoulder. Not all the stories are so charming. Some nights you wake to the sound of raised voices, a stranger demanding money, threatening to expose the boy's parentage. Maria stands her ground, her voice steady, but you can see the toll it takes. Afterward, she walks the halls in her nightgown, checking windows, whispering prayers in Polish and French. Alexandra follows, never far behind. You become part of the household's quiet code. You know to close the shutters at dusk, to ignore the letters with broken wax seals, to always refer to the boy as Alexander Walewski, and never as Napoleon's son. Still, the truth seeps in, like water through old stone. Once, when the cook's apprentice asks too many questions, he's sent back to the village with a coin and a warning. Curiosity killed the kitchen boy. You hope it's just a joke. Through it all, Maria is a study in contradictions. She is fiercely protective, yet heartbreakingly resigned. She teaches Alexander to be proud, but also to blend in. She wants him to have everything, but knows he must want nothing. You see her write letters to Paris, to Vienna, to Warsaw, always careful, always measured. Sometimes, when she thinks no one is looking, she traces the boy's face with her fingers, memorizing him in case he's taken away. When Alexander is old enough, Maria arranges for him to attend school in Switzerland, far from the reach of French politics. She packs his trunk herself, folding his shirts with military precision, tucking a locket with a lock of Napoleon's hair into a hidden pocket. The day he leaves, she doesn't cry, not where anyone can see at least. Instead, she stands in the courtyard, her posture straight, her eyes fixed on the horizon, as if daring the world to come and take him. You wonder what kind of life awaits him, a life of secrets, or a life finally free of them. Will he ever return to France, claim his heritage, and demand what he is owed? Or will he choose anonymity, safety, and the quiet dignity of being nobody's pawn? You don't know, but you do know that Maria will never stop loving him, or fearing for him no matter how far he goes. Years pass, empires rise and fall. Alexander grows into a man, smart, cunning, careful with his trust. He becomes a diplomat, a writer, a quiet force in the background of history. You hear his name mentioned at grand banquets, and whispered in smoky backrooms. Napoleon's son, some say, with a mix of awe and envy. Walewski, others insist, trying to keep the past buried. The truth, as always, is somewhere in between. And you remain in the kitchen, rolling dough, and remembering a boy who carried the weight of an empire on his narrow shoulders. You never tell his secrets, not even to yourself, because some stories, you've learned, are too precious to share and too dangerous to forget. So, the next time you see a child with a wary smile and a soldier's posture, you might wonder, what secrets do they carry? What names do they keep hidden? And how many mothers, in how many exiled mansions, pray every night that the world will let their children live in peace? You return to your work, the scent of bread rising in the oven, the memory of Alexandra's laughter echoing in the quiet dawn. The world spins on, secrets intact, another hidden heir surviving against all odds. The story always seems to circle back to Russia when it comes to royal secrets, where the winters are endless, the palaces stretch into the horizon, and even the truth itself seems to freeze beneath the snow. You find yourself in St. Petersburg, sometime in the early 1800s, a city of ice and shadows, where the legacy of the Romanovs is both legend and living curse. This is the world of vanished heirs and disappearing bastards, a world where a child can be born to the Tsar, and with a single order, vanish as if he never existed. You arrive on a night when the wind cuts straight through your fur-lined cloak, and the Neva River groans beneath slabs of shifting ice. The imperial court is in residence, but you're not here for the balls or the glittering parades. Your destination is a small, dimly lit chapel at the edge of the palace grounds, where Orthodox priests chant prayers in a haze of frankincense and candle smoke. The chapel is packed tonight, but you know why. Word has trickled through the servants' grapevine. There is to be a baptism, but no one is to speak of it. No one. You're pressed into service among the lowest ranks, passing out hot tea to the midwives and nursemaids waiting just outside the chapel. Inside, a woman, her face hidden by a thick woolen shawl, cradles a newborn child, her hands trembling as she presents the infant to the bearded priest. The child is healthy, red-cheeked, his cries sharp and strong. It is the only noise allowed to rise above the murmured prayers. You don't recognize the woman, but the men who accompany her are not ordinary footmen. They wear the insignia of the imperial guard, their eyes hard and watchful. You hear the priest whisper a name, one that sounds both grand and untraceable, carefully chosen to blend in with the endless ledgers of the Russian countryside. The baptism is brief, performed in near silence. As the water touches the child's brow, a hush falls, so deep you can hear the wind whistling through the cracks in the chapel walls. The mother, if she is the mother, presses her lips to the baby's forehead, tears streaking down her cheeks. The guards usher her out, and just like that, the child is gone, swept away into the darkness and the cold. You help gather the trays and cups, careful not to meet anyone's gaze. Back in the kitchens, the staff are unusually quiet. Who was she? Someone whispers. She looked too pale to be a commoner. Another shakes their head. Not our business. Best forgotten. But nothing is truly forgotten in the imperial court. A few days later, you catch snippets of conversation between a young chambermaid and her friend. They say he's the Tsar's, she says, her voice barely above a breath. Not by the Empress, by some noblewoman, or maybe a lady-in-waiting. My aunt says the Tsar's mother demanded the child be sent away to a monastery, or to a village far from here. Her friend nods knowingly. Safer that way. For everyone. You're learning how these stories grow legs and wander. In the market square, an old beggar woman claims she once nursed the Tsar's bastard son. In the palace laundry, maids swear they saw a young boy, dark hair, bright blue eyes, disappear into a carriage bound for the provinces. The rumours are everywhere, but the truth, that's locked behind gilded doors and heavy silences. Sometimes you spot a priest in the halls, robes swirling as he passes. He never meets your gaze, but you can feel the weight of secrets in his steps. Once, you glimpse a letter half buried beneath a stack of prayer books, a note addressed in a hand you recognize from royal decrees. The words are spare. The child is to be cared for as our own, but his origins must never be revealed. Instruct the brothers accordingly. You try not to dwell on the implications, but the palace is full of reminders. There are portraits of imperial children everywhere, but you start to notice the gaps. A painting that once hung in the blue salon now missing. A family miniature with one face carefully scratched away. Sometimes when the court gathers for Easter or Christmas, You catch a glimpse of a young boy among the choristers, a face strikingly familiar yet unnamed, always standing slightly apart. There are darker rumours, too. In the shadows of the stables and kitchens, you hear the old servants mutter, "Sometimes the babies don't survive. Sometimes the Tsar's enemies arrange for accidents, or illnesses, or a quiet burial in the snow." The older staff cross themselves and refuse to say more. Your own duties keep you busy, but you can't help noticing that the palace runs on these kinds of secrets. Every servant learns, sooner or later, that survival means asking no questions and remembering even less. But sometimes, in the still of the night, you wonder what happens to the children who are sent away. Do they remember their origins? Do they ever come back to claim what's theirs? Years pass. The court changes, new faces, new scandals, but the old patterns remain. You hear of a young monk in a distant monastery, rumoured to have the Tsar's eyes and a bearing that cannot be hidden beneath simple robes. The abbot, it's said, treats him with unusual deference. When a visiting noble asks after the boy's parentage, the answer is always the same. He is an orphan, brought to us as an act of charity. But charity, you've learnt, is often a mask for necessity. The boy grows into a man, quiet, intelligent, skilled at diplomacy and the sword. He speaks several languages, and has a peculiar knack for reading people. Occasionally a letter arrives from the capital, bearing the royal seal. The abbot reads it in private, then burns it in the fire. Some say the Tsar's bastard never truly disappears. Every so often, a crisis arises, a threat of rebellion, a problem in the provinces, an heir who falls mysteriously ill. That's when the boy is sent for, his skills called upon to quietly restore order or smooth over scandal. He is never acknowledged publicly, but his fingerprints are everywhere, from court intrigues to distant wars. You encounter him just once, in the monastery garden, trimming roses beneath the spring sun. He looks up, meets your eyes, and for a moment you see something deeply familiar, a royal carriage in his bearing, a sadness in his smile. He nods, thanks you for the bread, and returns to his work. It's enough. You sense that he knows his story, even if no one else is allowed to tell it. The years wear on. Sometimes, you hear that he's left the monastery altogether, perhaps to live as a merchant, or a tutor to noble children, or a soldier in some forgotten border war. His name changes as easily as the seasons, but the rumours persist. When the Tsar dies, a few old monks gather at the monastery's gates, watching the horizon for a carriage that never comes. In the capital, the official histories make no mention of the vanished child. The empress is praised for her virtue. The Tsar's memory is polished until it gleams. But among the staff, and in the dusty records kept by half-blind scribes, the truth survives in fragments. A birth registered under a false name, a generous annual donation to a remote monastery, a series of coded letters tucked away in a forgotten drawer. And sometimes, late at night, you wonder if the Romanovs ever truly lost control of their dynasty, or if they simply learned to rule from the shadows. After all, a secret heir can be a powerful weapon, a living threat to rivals, a backup plan for desperate times, a reminder that royal blood runs deep, even when it's been carefully erased. In the end, you leave St. Petersburg behind, the city's spires fading into the mist, but the memory of that hidden baptism, the child swept away into anonymity, stays with you. You know there are hundreds more like him, lost to history, remembered only in whispers and faded ink. You carry these stories with you, tucked into the corners of your mind, alongside the lessons learned in palaces and monasteries, that the greatest secrets are rarely buried forever, and that every dynasty, no matter how grand, is only ever one scandal away from collapse. So next time you pass a choir boy singing in a golden chapel, or a quiet monk tending roses in a walled garden, you might ask yourself, whose son is he really? And what future, waiting in the snow, might he yet claim? When you cross the threshold into the world of Queen Victoria, you expect a rigid empire of lace collars, cucumber sandwiches, and the absolute certainty of proper names and paperwork. What you don't expect is the hum of secrecy vibrating just below the surface of every afternoon tea and garden party, a network of courtiers and housemaids, more skilled at covering up improprieties than any London fog ever could be at hiding the skyline. And tonight your candlelit path winds straight into Osborne House, the Queen's private retreat on the Isle of Wight, where the whispers are softer but the stakes are every bit as high. It's the late 19th century. You're elbow deep in lemon polish and silver platters, minding your own business in the bustling downstairs world of Victorian domesticity. There's the scent of scones browning in the oven, a string quartet practicing somewhere upstairs, and just the faintest, unmistakable smell of anxiety wafting from the Queen's private wing. You've seen this before. Staff moving with the hush of conspirators, maids pausing just a beat too long before answering, a new boy on the grounds who doesn't quite look like he belongs. This time, the secret has a distinctly imperial flavour. Rumour travels on the wind from Windsor to Osborne, picked up by stable boys and kitchen girls alike. One of Victoria's own grandchildren might not be so ordinary. In fact, the boy's features set him apart. His hair is as dark as ink, his skin a warm light brown, and his eyes flash with a mischief that no amount of etiquette training can quite smother. Some whisper that his father was Prince Leopold, the Queen's haemophiliac youngest son. Others add a twist. His mother was Indian, a lady's maid who vanished almost as soon as the baby drew breath. You first lay eyes on him in the rose garden, where he's been given a perfunctory Latin lesson by a nervous young tutor. The child, whose name changes depending on who's telling the tale, is quick to laugh and quicker to dodge questions about his family. When you bring lemonade and biscuits, he thanks you in perfect English, his accent strangely musical. For a second, you see a flicker of something regal in the way he nods, a look you've seen on Victoria herself as she surveys her domain from the terrace. The household goes out of its way to insist there's nothing odd going on. The boy is a ward, a special favourite, a distant cousin from somewhere colonial. Yet his lessons are supervised by the Queen's private secretary. His nurse is hand-picked and silent as the grave. He never joins the other children for games or formal dinners, and if you listen closely at night, you'll hear the Queen herself visiting his nursery, reading softly in a mixture of English and Hindustani. The staff are forbidden to mention him in letters home, a new rule, apparently, one with the weight of royal command. Victoria, for all her public austerity, is not immune to the softening that comes with age and grief. Since the death of Prince Albert, she's taken to keeping those she cares about closest, sometimes to the point of smothering them with affection, and sometimes, if they threaten the family's image, pushing them so far into the shadows that even their names are scrubbed from the record. You see both impulses at war in her treatment of the boy. There are moments when she holds his hand, smoothing his hair with the tenderness of a grandmother who's lost too many loved ones. There are others when she retreats into cold distance, allowing only the briefest of meetings before sending him back to his lessons. The staff speculate endlessly. "Do you think the Queen knows?" one of the laundresses asks, shaking out a sheet in the pale morning light. "She knows everything," answers the housekeeper, not bothering to look up from her accounts. "But what she does with what she knows is another matter." The kitchen maid is less discreet. "I heard the child's mother was sent away to India. Paid off, they say, with enough money to start a tea plantation. Someone else claims the boy is due to be packed off to a distant school the moment he turns 7, never to be seen again." The boy himself moves through Osborne like a shadow. Neither truly belonging, nor entirely excluded, he reads voraciously, asking questions about far-off places and the rules that keep people apart. You once catch him staring at a portrait of the Queen, his expression a mixture of longing and confusion. Later, you overhear a heated conversation between two senior footmen debating whether the boy will grow up to become a gentleman or simply disappear into the machinery of the empire. One day, the Queen receives a letter with an unfamiliar seal. Her face hardens as she reads it, and for a week afterward, the boy is confined to his room, his lessons cancelled. The staff whisper that an official from the India office has visited and that something is being arranged. The nurse takes longer walks with the child in the woods, speaking to him in hushed tones. You see the weight of secrecy pressing down on the household, the constant fear that one wrong word could bring scandal crashing through the front gates. And then, as suddenly as he appeared, the boy is gone. The household is told he has gone to stay with relatives in the country. The Queen is seen weeping in the chapel, her private secretary writing furiously late into the night. The staff are made to swear new oaths of silence, and the boy's room is scrubbed clean, every trace of his presence erased. every toy boxed up and sent who knows where. Yet, you can still feel the imprint he left behind. In the gardens, a wooden hoop lies forgotten beneath a rosebush. In the schoolroom, a book in Hindi has slipped behind the fireplace. Even the dogs seem to pause near the door of his former nursery, noses twitching as if expecting him to return. You realize that for all the Queen's power, even she cannot completely erase the truth. News from London arrives in dribs and drabs. A new ward has turned up at a boarding school in Yorkshire, described as unusually well-spoken, of exotic appearance. He excels at languages and fencing, but never receives visitors. His tuition is paid in cash by an agent who refuses to answer questions. Once, at a cricket match, a teacher remarks that the boy carries himself like a prince, and is quickly shushed by another member of staff. The story travels with you long after you leave Osborne. You hear of the boy's quiet successes, a scholarship here, a commission in the army there. He never draws attention to himself, never courts scandal, but those who know how to look see the signs. A gold locket tucked beneath his collar, the way he stands at attention for the national anthem, the slight pause when someone asks about his parents. In the end, the empire rolls on, its secrets buried in ledgers and locked drawers. Victoria lives to see her great-grandchildren, but the boy's story becomes just another rumour, spoken of only in kitchens and servants' quarters, preserved in the memories of those who witnessed the truth, but will never record it. And you? You tuck the secret away with all the others, a living, breathing reminder that royal blood runs in unexpected veins, and that the empire's true legacy is not just in its palaces and armies, but in the children it refuses to claim. Sometimes, late at night, you dream of the boy, now a man, standing on a hilltop somewhere far from England, looking back at the world that once rejected him. You hope he knows that he was seen, if only for a moment, and that in a world built on secrets, his story still matters. You close your eyes to the memory of Osborne House, sunlight glinting on the solent, the sound of distant laughter, and the quiet footsteps of a child no one wanted to acknowledge, but who, for a brief bright season, changed the shape of a royal life. You step lightly along the cold flagstones of a candlelit corridor, the air thick with beeswax and incense, the hush broken only by the distant toll of bells. Austria, mid-1800s, a land where dynasties rise and fall with the brush of a pen or the whisper of a secret. Tonight your path curves sharply away from the ballrooms and banquets of imperial Vienna and descends into a realm where secrets are as heavy as the stones under your feet. For here, in the shadow of the Habsburgs, you follow the silent footsteps of a prince whose very existence is cloaked in secrecy, a hidden son disguised as a monk. The monastery itself is ancient, hunched against the winds at the edge of a pine forest, its walls mottled by centuries of damp and prayer. As you enter, the smell of cold stone and wood smoke fills your lungs. The candlelight flickers against painted icons, casting holy shadows on faces that have seen too much. The world outside, with its court intrigues and endless rules about bloodlines, feels impossibly far away, but you know it's only an illusion. Even here, royalty leaves its mark, sometimes in gold leaf, more often in the faces of the men who serve in silence. You're shown in by an elderly porter whose eyes, sharp as winter frost, size you up before he lets you pass. "Quiet," he murmurs. "The brothers are at Compline." You nod and keep your questions to yourself. This is not a place for loud voices or casual curiosity. In the refectory, monks file past, heads bowed, voices barely above a murmur. But every so often, you notice one among them, a young man with fine-boned features, the kind you'd expect to see on a coin or in a miniature portrait. His hands are delicate, but there's a wiry strength in his movements, a posture that betrays years of etiquette and fencing lessons, even if his robe hides it well. It isn't hard to gather the whispers. The older monks pretend not to see, but the kitchen boys talk. "He came to us in the dead of night," one says, as you help peel potatoes, escorted by a nobleman and a doctor, both with faces like thunder. Another shakes his head, eyes wide. "They say he was a prince, but his mother was not a princess." So he is. Brother Nicolaus now. Also, we're told. You observe Nicolaus as the weeks pass. He spends hours in the library, poring over Latin texts and treatises on statecraft. He tends the monastery's roses, with the surgeon's precision, kneeling in the dirt, with a focus that is almost fierce. He rarely speaks at meals, but when he does, the other brothers fall silent, as if they recognize something different about him, something that doesn't belong in this place of humility and quiet. You catch glimpses of the world that might have been his. Sometimes, a carriage with darkened windows arrives in the middle of the night. The abbot meets it at the gate, and there is always a gift left behind. A chest of fine wine, a stack of books in French and Italian, once even a set of dueling pistols, carefully wrapped and discreetly stored away. The abbot never discusses these visits, but afterward, Brother Nicolaus seems subdued, wandering the grounds with a restlessness you know too well, the ache of someone living a life that was never truly theirs. The brothers treat him with a strange mixture of deference and distance. He leads the choir, his voice clear and haunting, and yet he is never chosen for the humblest chores. When the bishop visits, Nicolaus is suddenly on retreat, hidden away in a distant cell. You realize that the monastery is not just a place of refuge for him, it is also a prison, built not of bars but of obedience and omission.
You learn more from the cook, who has been here longer than anyone. One night, as you scrub pots by the fire, she confides, "I've seen his mother, came once, years ago, just after dawn. She wore a veil, but you could see her eyes red from weeping. She left a letter and a rosary, and that was the last of it." You picture the scene, a noble woman whose love for the wrong man condemned her son to a life of silent service. The cook shakes her head. He's Habsburg, make no mistake, but the emperor, he can't afford another scandal. Too many bastards, not enough crowns.
Nicolaus's past is written in the details. He quotes Virgil when pruning the vines. He sketches cityscapes from memory in the margins of prayer books. He knows the names of every ambassador in Europe, but rarely uses his own. Sometimes, in the dead of night, you hear him practicing fencing moves in the cloister, the soft scrape of his shoes echoing off the stone. It's a reminder that, even in the most cloistered of lives, the old world still claws at the door. You begin to see how he manages his isolation. He befriends a handful of young monks, teaching them chess and astronomy, stories about distant lands that sound suspiciously first-hand. He is never cruel, never boastful, but there's a sadness to his kindness, as if he is always giving away pieces of himself that he knows he cannot keep. The abbot treats him as both a burden and a blessing, a living reminder of the monastery's secret patron, and a secret too dangerous to ever be spoken aloud. Then one spring, the rumor spreads that the emperor is ill, that the line of succession is uncertain. Whispers reach even the quiet corners of the cloister. Visitors arrive more frequently. Diplomats, priests, a mysterious old general with a gold watch and a limp. Each time, Nicolaus is summoned to the abbot's study. You're never told what is discussed, but after these meetings, he spends hours in prayer, sometimes weeping, sometimes just staring at the cracked tiles beneath his knees. The monastery itself seems to change. The brothers are more watchful, the gates are locked earlier, the kitchen receives deliveries of finer food. One morning, a letter arrives, sealed with imperial wax. The abbot reads it in silence, his face pale, then hands it to Nicolaus. For days afterward, Nicolaus is absent from meals, his cell door closed. When he re-emerges, he moves through the halls with a new gravity, as if preparing himself for a test only he understands. There are rumors, of course, that he will be called upon to serve as a pawn in some dynastic marriage, or perhaps as a secret advisor, ready to step into the light if the legitimate heirs fall. But Nicolaus does not speak of his future. Instead, he focuses on the present, the bees in the garden, the melodies of the liturgy, the stories he tells to the novices who sit wide-eyed at his feet. You realize that, in his own way, Nicolaus has mastered the art of survival. He has learned to be useful, to keep secrets, to offer wisdom without revealing his true self. He is a ghost at the banquet of history, moving unseen among those who would shape the fate of Europe. Eventually, the emperor recovers, and the crisis passes. The visitors stop coming, and the gates return to their usual quiet. Nicolaus returns to his daily tasks, but you sense a shift. He walks with a lighter step, as if freed from the weight of expectation. You see him laughing with the kitchen boys, composing new hymns for the choir, even sneaking apples from the orchard when he thinks no one is looking. And yet, the secret of his birth never really leaves him. On the anniversary of his arrival, he lights a candle in the chapel, kneels in silence, and whispers a prayer in Latin. No one asks what he prays for, but you suspect it's not just for himself, but for the mother who lost him, the father who abandoned him, and the empire that made him both prince and prisoner. You come to understand that, in the great machinery of the Habsburg dynasty, there are many like Nikolaus, children born of brief passion and lifelong silence, hidden in monasteries or sent to distant estates, living half-lives in the shadows of a crown they will never wear. The history books may never record their names, but the walls remember the echoes of their voices, the touch of their hands on stone and soil, the lingering scent of roses in the cloister garden. When you finally leave the monastery, the porter presses a loaf of bread into your hands and bids you Godspeed. You look back at the bell tower, silhouetted against the sunrise, and wonder if Nikolaus will ever step into the world that was once his by right, or if, like so many secret heirs, he will choose to remain in the peace of anonymity, carrying his legacy quietly, known only to the few who dared to see past the mask. As you walk away, the bells begin to ring for morning prayers, a reminder that life goes on, secrets and all, and you can't help but smile, knowing that somewhere behind those ancient walls, a Habsburg prince still sings in the choir, his voice blending with the voices of those who, like him, were born to be both everything and nothing. Your slippers click softly on polished stone, trailing behind a royal page, as you wind your way deeper into the heart of a palace that hums with secrets. Now you're halfway across the world, breathing the perfumed night air of old Joseon, Korea. It's a place where every shadow can mean intrigue, and where every creak of wood or flutter of silk could mark the boundary between privilege and disgrace. In the labyrinthine court of the 19th century Korean dynasty, the stakes for a forbidden birth are as high as the palace walls themselves. Tonight, a nearly full moon shines down through latticed windows onto gleaming floors, lighting up a corridor that leads to a tiny locked chamber. Most of the palace slumbers, ladies in waiting curled on their sleeping mats, guards nodding beneath the eaves. But here, near the Queen's garden, you sense movement. You hear it too, a faint whimper muffled by thick doors, the hush of a woman's voice urging quiet, the brisk, precise footsteps of the midwife. You're here on errand, carrying medicinal tea, but you recognize at once that you're witnessing something never meant for the daylight. A royal concubine, face flushed, hair undone, the lacquered pins of her rank set aside, is in labor. Her chamber is cloaked in secrecy. Two trusted palace women attend her, hands sure and gentle, voices clipped with urgency. Outside, a eunuch stands guard, his face a mask of stone. No one else is allowed near. You catch a glimpse of her eyes, defiant, desperate, resolute. This is no ordinary birth, and you know it. The court's ancient codes forbid a concubine's child from threatening the line of succession, but the man who fathered this child is no mere noble. He is the king himself, whose public sons have died young or fallen out of favor. The king's affection for this concubine is whispered about in every corner of the palace, stoking the fears and ambitions of the legitimate queen's supporters. The labor is long and hard. You hear it, the muffled cries, the frantic instructions, the sharp scent of blood in the air. Someone outside begins a prayer for safe delivery, a chant you barely remember from your own village. The room is stifling, despite the coolness of night. You sense the anxiety in the air. Will the baby survive? Will the secret? Because in Joseon, royal succession is a high-stakes chessboard, and every pawn's move can topple a dynasty. Finally, near dawn, the child arrives, a boy, his cries quick and strong. The midwife cuts the cord and wraps him in plain cloth, not royal silk, her movements efficient, practiced. There's no proclamation, no court official recording the birth, only a private, breathless relief. The concubine weeps, cradling her son. For a moment you see pure joy flicker in her expression, quickly shadowed by the fear of what comes next. You slip away, the cup of tea forgotten, your mind racing with what you've seen. In the palace kitchens, gossip blooms like night jasmine. Some whisper that the concubine's child will be quietly smuggled out to a countryside foster family. Others claim he'll be kept close, hidden in plain sight as a servant, always within reach in case fate suddenly needs a replacement prince. The bravest of the kitchen staff wonder if the king himself will protect his secret son, or abandon him to palace politics. As the weeks go by, you notice changes. The concubine recovers, but is kept secluded, her rooms guarded by her most loyal attendants. The baby, who is officially listed as stillborn in the palace records, remains alive, growing strong. He is nursed in secret, his existence known only to a handful of trusted women and one silent, sharp-eyed eunuch. On nights when the palace is quietest, you see a small bundle carried from one chamber to another, always with the utmost caution. The child is never shown in public. He does not attend the daily greeting ceremonies or appear in the garden with the other royal children. But sometimes, when the queen's retinue is away, you glimpse him toddling in a secluded courtyard, chasing butterflies while his mother watches anxiously from the shadows. He grows quickly, intelligent and stubborn, inheriting his mother's sharp cheekbones and his father's steady, appraising gaze. Years pass, and the secret becomes both heavier and more dangerous. Factions at court begin to sense that something is being hidden. The Queen's supporters redouble their efforts to keep the king close and the concubines at bay. Every time a noble falls from favor or a rival family is exiled, whispers float through the corridors. The secret son would change everything. Some courtiers try to curry favor with the concubine, bringing gifts, sending coded notes. Others attempt to expose her, but find only locked doors and fiercely loyal servants. Meanwhile, the boy is educated far above his supposed station. Private tutors arrive under cover of darkness. Confucian scholars, calligraphy masters, even a retired military officer. He learns to read and write, to calculate, to ride and shoot, all with the discipline expected of a future king, though never acknowledged as such. His mother warns him constantly, "You must never speak of who you are, but you must never forget it, either." It's the same lesson you once heard in faraway Parma, and you realize how royal secrets all seem to rhyme, no matter the language. The palace life is relentless. While the world outside changes, Westerners arrive in ports, missionaries bring new customs, and rumors of rebellion flicker on the horizon. Inside the walls, the old rules hold tight. The king grows older, his health failing. Ambitious ministers jostle for position. The queen's supporters plot, and the concubine's son watches it all from the shadows, absorbing lessons in politics and patience. When the king dies unexpectedly, the palace plunges into crisis. The legitimate heir is a sickly child, surrounded by hostile factions. The concubine's son, now nearly a teenager, senses his moment may be coming, or ending. You see him moving with new purpose, meeting secretly with the eunuch and a few trusted advisors, listening more than speaking. For a time it seems possible he could be brought forward as a solution to the looming succession crisis. Rumors swirl that influential elders are weighing his claim, measuring whether the stability of the kingdom is worth breaking the rules of blood and legitimacy. But in the end, the iron laws of Joseon win out. The queen's allies are too powerful, the risks too great. The concubine's son is not called forward. Instead, the court quietly arranges for his exile, a comfortable but remote posting in the countryside, under the care of distant relatives loyal to the old king. There, he will live out his life as a minor noble, with a stipend generous enough to ensure silence, but never enough to threaten the throne. The concubine is rewarded for her discretion, new robes, a private garden, the right to see her son twice a year, under guard. She wears her sorrow like a silk scarf, beautiful and impenetrable. The boy, meanwhile, grows into a thoughtful, melancholy young man. He writes poetry, studies history, practices archery in the dawn light, and never mentions his parentage. You hear he is well liked by local scholars, admired for his wisdom and humility. Still, there is always something unfinished about him, a restlessness in his eyes, a longing for the life he was never allowed to claim. Back in the palace, the story is kept alive only by the oldest servants, those who remember the night of his birth. Occasionally a letter arrives, a coded message, a silk handkerchief, a tiny jade ornament, reminding mother and son that though separated, their bond endures. You too remember. You tuck the memory away with all the others. The secret prince, who almost changed the fate of a kingdom. The mother who gambled everything for a future that never came. It's easy to forget how many lives hinge on secrets in places like this. How much hope and heartbreak can be hidden in a single silent chamber, a locked door, a whispered prayer for a child who will never wear a crown, but will always bear the weight of royal blood. And as you leave the palace behind, moonlight spilling across the rooftops, you wonder how many other stories are buried in its walls. How many sons and daughters were loved in secret, sacrificed to keep dynasties alive. The night air is sweet with magnolia, and somewhere, far away, a young man sharpens his arrows and writes his name in careful brushstrokes, never sure if he is a prince or simply a memory. You step out into the bright morning sun of Addis Ababa, the air crisp and thin at this altitude, but heavy with the fragrance of roasted coffee and blooming jacarandas. Ethiopia in the mid-20th century is a tapestry of old and new ancient stone churches just blocks from busy boulevards. Noblemen in European suits, brushing past priests in flowing white robes. Today you are drawn not to the ceremonial grandeur of the imperial palace, but to a quiet, ivy-shaded villa at the edge of the city. Here, hidden behind heavy drapes and guarded gates, another secret heir grows, a royal child known to almost no one. His future balanced precariously between hope and erasure. You arrive at the villa on a day when the city is humming with preparations for a grand parade. Emperor Haile Selassie's birthday is near, and the capital swarms with soldiers, musicians and dignitaries from every corner of Africa. The palace itself is a fortress of ceremony, banners rippling in the highland breeze. But the true intrigue, as you know by now, often takes root where the crowds do not gather. Inside the villa, you feel the hush of privilege and caution, a place scrubbed clean of fingerprints, where every cushion, every vase, every folded napkin has its place. The household staff move with studied discretion, never speaking above a whisper. At the heart of this carefully curated silence is a woman known only as the Lady, elegant but anxious, with the bearing of a court favourite who has seen her fortunes rise and fall on a royal whim. It is the lady's son who interests you most, a boy of 10 or 11, named Amari by his mother, though that name never appears on any official document. He has the delicate features of his mother and the unmistakable eyes of the emperor, wise and searching even in youth. The boy's presence is both a miracle and a threat, for the emperor's public children are closely watched, their lives played out before the court and the press, while Amari is kept hidden, a secret protected by the loyalty of a handful of trusted retainers. You first glimpse him in the garden, a book of Ethiopian poetry balanced on his knees, as he traces lines of script with an inky finger. A bodyguard lingers a few paces away, pretending to prune the roses. The lady watches from a shaded veranda, lips pressed tight, her eyes never straying far from her child. Their life is one of quiet routines. Breakfast in the sunlit kitchen, lessons in Amharic and French, a few stolen moments of play behind the high stone walls. There is no talk of fathers here, but the house is full of reminders. A portrait of the emperor hangs in the lady's bedroom, its glass polished so often that the gold frame has worn thin at the corners. Letters arrive from the palace every month, brought by a silent, uniformed courier. Sometimes the lady reads them aloud, her voice trembling over the formal phrases, words of caution, of affection, of promise, but never ever of acknowledgement. Amari is not allowed visitors. His teachers are carefully chosen, his outings limited to the villa's grounds. Yet he is no recluse. When you meet his gaze, he returns it directly, with the confidence of someone who knows he is destined for more than just shadows. You hear him question his tutors about history and justice, about the right of kings and the fate of Ethiopia's poorest children. Sometimes he slips away to listen to the radio, picking up snatches of foreign languages and news from beyond the walls. The lady's closest confidant is an old palace guard, Captain Desta, whose devotion to the family is absolute. He alone is entrusted with the knowledge of Amari's birth. It was Desta who, years earlier, spirited the lady out of the palace by night, through hidden corridors and servant passages, after a private confrontation with the empress herself. Desta keeps a locked drawer in his room. Inside are Amari's real birth certificate, a locket containing a lock of the emperor's hair, and a faded photograph of the boy as a baby, wrapped in a blanket embroidered with imperial crests. Desta's loyalty comes at a price. His own family never speaks his name. He spends most nights on a cot by the door to Amari's room, pistol within reach, always alert for a summons from the palace or a knock in the night. You find him sometimes on the roof at sunrise, eyes on the horizon, muttering prayers for the safety of the child who could both save and destroy the royal line. As Amiri grows older, the tension grows as well. The lady urges caution in all things. "Speak softly, my son," she whispers as she braids his hair. "And remember, you are seen by those who matter and must be invisible to those who do not." But the boy's curiosity is hard to contain. He asks questions about his absent father, about his place in the world, about the meaning of justice and loyalty. The lady's answers are careful, crafted with the precision of someone who knows that words can be as dangerous as knives. Rumors begin to seep through the walls, as they always do. The servant's cousin claims to have seen the emperor's shadow child in the market, buying sweets. An ambitious courtier drops hints at a dinner party about a forgotten son, his voice loud enough to reach the wrong ears. The palace sends a discreet inquiry to the lady, reminding her of her obligations, her privileges, and the limits of both. You sense the circle tightening, the sense of safety shrinking. One day, the lady receives an invitation to a private audience with the emperor. She prepares carefully, dressing in her finest silk, braiding her hair with gold. She instructs Amari to wait for her in the study, warning him not to answer the door, not to speak to anyone. As she leaves, her face is set in a mask of calm determination. You see Captain Desta watching her go, worry etched in every line of his face. The lady's return is late and quiet. She moves through the house like a shadow, her steps heavy. You overhear fragments of conversation between her and Desta. The emperor is aging, his enemies gathering strength, the future uncertain. The lady weeps softly that night, her sobs muffled by a pillow. Amara finds her in the early morning, climbing into her lap as she murmurs lullabies from her own childhood, songs older than the empire itself. Life continues in this tense balance. Amari is now a young man, tall and solemn, with the bearing of someone who knows he is marked for something greater than the villa can contain. Captain Desta begins training him in self-defense, teaching him to ride, to shoot, to survive if the world suddenly turns against them. You see the pride and sorrow mingled in Desta's eyes as he watches his pupil master each lesson. Then the world outside changes. In 1974, revolution explodes in Addis Ababa. Crowds fill the streets, soldiers turn on their officers, and the palace gates are stormed. The emperor is deposed, the imperial family arrested or exiled. In the chaos, the villa becomes both sanctuary and prison. Desta bars the gates. The lady hides the family's few valuables, and Amari is forced to burn the letters from his father, the only proof he ever existed. For weeks you listen to the sounds of gunfire and chanting from the city below. Food grows scarce, friends disappear, and the old rules fall away. Captain Desta moves like a ghost through the villa, always watching, always listening for the approach of soldiers. The lady and Amari stay close to the house, praying for news, hoping for mercy. One night, a knock comes at the gate. Desta answers with his pistol drawn, but it is a friend, a priest, come to help them escape. He brings forged documents, new names, a plan to slip out of the city under cover of darkness. The lady hesitates only a moment before agreeing. You help them pack, tucking what little can be saved into a battered suitcase. The locket, the photograph, a handful of jewelry, a worn book of poetry. Their escape is harrowing, hours of tense waiting, a journey through empty streets, the fear of discovery at every checkpoint. At last they find refuge in a remote mountain village, where the priest has arranged for them to hide among distant relatives. Here, Amari becomes just another boy working in the fields, learning to fish, teaching the village children to read. The lady takes up the life of a simple matron, always watching, always listening for news from Addis Ababa. Years pass. The old empire never returns, but neither does it completely die. Whispers persist of a hidden heir. Some say he is dead, others claim he lives in exile, plotting a return. You hear stories of a tall stranger who speaks perfect Amharic and French, who teaches in a distant school and never reveals his true name. Sometimes, when the jacarandas bloom, a letter arrives for the lady, unsigned, but bearing the code words of the old palace, a reminder that even in exile, family ties endure. You leave Ethiopia with the memory of Amare's steady gaze and the lady's silent strength. Their story joins all the others you've gathered, the secrets kept for the sake of love, the heirs hidden for the sake of peace, the futures balanced on the edge of a locked drawer, and a loyal friend. In the end, you understand that the legacy of secret royal births is not always found in palaces or titles. Sometimes it lives on in quiet acts of courage, in the loyalty of a guard who risks everything, in the resilience of a mother who loves her child more than her own safety, and in the hope of a lost heir who dares to dream of a different future, even if the world never learns his true name. Now, you walk the narrow lanes of Tokyo in the early post-war years, where the past seems to cling to every tiled roof and cherry tree, and the future arrives in the form of clattering streetcars and American jeeps. The city is battered but stubborn, still radiating the pride of a 1,000-year-old empire, even as its palaces sit half-shuttered and the imperial family bows to new rules written by distant generals. Here, in the shifting light between occupation and tradition, you follow the faintest thread of a rumor, a hidden royal daughter, lost in the shuffle of surrender and shame. You find yourself in a quiet suburb, far from the grand halls of the imperial palace. The air smells of rain and tatami mats, and the postman's whistle sounds across garden walls. You are just another neighbor, blending in among housewives tending to their vegetable plots and children practicing sumo in the dust. But you're watching a certain modest house, its fence painted a precise shade of green, its windows always shuttered at dusk. Inside lives a girl, about 6 years old, with sleek black hair and a manner both shy and impeccably well-mannered. She is called Hanako by her foster parents, but you soon learn this is not her first name, and likely not her last. Hanako's parents are older, quiet, and treat her with a formality that seems strange even in a country famous for reserve. She eats first, her shoes placed at the exact center of the entryway. When visitors arrive, she bows deeper than other children, her words too polished for a child so young. You catch the shadow of her lessons: how to hold a fan, how to kneel with perfect posture, how to write kanji with the precision of a palace scribe. You learn from the old woman next door that Hanako arrived after the war, her relatives bringing her from a distant prefecture. She's a good girl, the neighbor says, but she always looks out the window when the trains pass, like she's waiting for someone. Some nights you see the foster father sitting alone on the porch, chain-smoking, his eyes fixed on the garden lantern, as if he's guarding secrets with every inhale. The world outside Hanako's little house is in turmoil. The emperor has renounced his divinity. The imperial family is being pared down, its junior branches forced into commoner life or exile. The American occupation authorities scrutinize every record, every budget, every family tree, but there are some things even the general headquarters can't quite pin down, like how in the confusion of 1945, a baby girl was quietly removed from one wing of the palace and placed in the arms of a couple whose loyalty to the imperial household ran deeper than blood. You piece together the whispers. Hanako's real mother was a minor princess, barely out of her teens, whose brief, disastrous romance with a palace attendant resulted in scandal. In peacetime, there would have been tears, exile, perhaps a marriage hastily arranged in a distant province. But the war changes everything. As Tokyo burns and the palace is strafed by bombs, the solution is both simple and devastating. The infant is sent away before she can be listed in any official record, before her existence becomes a problem for a court struggling to survive defeat and occupation. Hanako's life is a careful balancing act. Her foster parents shield her from the world while quietly preparing her for what no one seems to know. She excels at her studies, speaks both Japanese and English, the language of her new overlords, and wins every etiquette contest at school, but she has no family photos, no baby album, no relatives who come to call. Once a man in a dark suit arrives at the door, delivers a parcel of books and sweets, and bows so deeply you know he is a messenger from another world. As Hanako grows, so does the rift between her public life and private identity. You see her struggle with questions she dares not ask. Why do her parents cry on her birthday, whispering apologies into the night? Why does her mother burn every letter that comes from the imperial post office, tears streaking her face? Why, when other children boast of their ancestors, does Hanako say nothing, simply smiling and changing the subject? Occasionally, on certain auspicious dates, the emperor's birthday, the cherry blossom festival, her foster father disappears for the afternoon, returning home with a rare bottle of sake and a faraway look in his eye. That night the family dines together in silence, the air heavy with the sense of an occasion both sacred and forbidden. You sense that these are the days when Hanako's true history is closest to the surface, but no one ever speaks of it directly. One winter, A new neighbor arrives, a retired nurse who once worked in the palace infirmary. She takes a quiet interest in Hanato, occasionally pressing sweets into her hand or straightening the girl's kimono before school. One day, you overhear her speaking in hushed tones to the foster mother. "You're very brave. Not everyone could do what you did for her." The foster mother's reply is lost, but her tears are not. The years pass, and Hanako blossoms into a thoughtful, self-possessed young woman. She is offered a scholarship to a prestigious school in Kyoto, an opportunity no foster child could afford, but which arrives with a single call from an unnamed benefactor. In Kyoto, she studies literature, mastering both the classics and modern poetry. Her friends remark on her poise, her strange mix of sadness and confidence. When asked about her family, she only smiles and says, "I'm grateful for what I have." Occasionally, Hanako receives a formal invitation, always delivered in person, always unmarked. She travels to Tokyo for private meetings at quiet tea houses, where she is greeted by dignified older men and women who treat her with deference. Sometimes you catch a glimpse of her escort, a palace aide in a crisp suit, the same man who brought her books as a child. Hanako never says what passes in those meetings, only that they want to know how I am. The post-war decades rush on. Japan rebuilds, becoming an economic powerhouse. The imperial family recedes from daily life, their own scandals, quietly managed by the imperial household agency. Hanako's story never makes the papers, but you hear it in the way teachers lower their voices when discussing her grades, in the way her classmates stand a little straighter when she enters a room. She moves through the world as if carrying an invisible burden, never demanding, never complaining, always polite, always just a little apart. When her foster parents pass away, Hanako is left alone, her origins more mysterious than ever. The palace sends flowers to the funeral. The nurse from next door holds her hand and whispers, "They'll never forget you." Later, you see Hanako sitting in her old garden, a book of poems open in her lap, the lantern casting soft light on her face. She weeps quietly, not for herself, but for the lives lost to secrecy and sacrifice.
In middle age, Hanako becomes a teacher, respected and beloved by her students. She never marries, never takes a public stand about her past, but every year on the emperor's birthday, she receives a small parcel, a folded crane made from gold paper, a rare calligraphy brush, a silk handkerchief bearing a royal crest. She keeps them all in a wooden box, hidden at the back of her closet, a private shrine to the family she never truly knew.
You realize, in the end, that Hanako's story is not about power or revenge, but about quiet resilience. She is the living embodiment of what Japan became after the war, dignified in loss, graceful in adversity, forever balancing the pain of memory with the hope of moving forward. Her life is a silent testament to the costs of royal secrecy, a story written not in history books, but in the gentle way she guides her students, in the letters she never sends, in the dreams she keeps for herself alone. And so, as the cherry blossoms fall each spring, you remember the hidden princess who walked among the people, her true name, a secret, her legacy, a lesson in kindness and strength. You leave Tokyo with the scent of rain and hope in the air, knowing that even the most carefully buried stories can bloom, quietly, into something beautiful. You travel farther than you ever expected this journey of hidden heirs would take you, across continents, down muddy roads in a land torn open by colonial violence, into a place where secrets are not just whispered, but seared into the very soil. Now you stand at the edge of the Belgian Congo in the late 1800s, the jungle pressing in with a dense green hush, the river gleaming and dangerous. You're here because even the world's darkest corners are not immune to the shadows of royalty. In this place of paradox, you discover the story of a dark child, a daughter born to King Leopold II of Belgium, and a woman whose very existence the king's court tried to erase. Leopold's Congo is the stuff of nightmares, rubber quotas enforced with gunfire, hands severed for missed deadlines, villages burned, children stolen, millions dead, and the world only slowly awakening to the scale of the horror. Yet even here, even as missionaries count the missing and colonial officers draw up new cruelties, the machinery of royal secrecy is at work. The official story is all public projects and grand gestures, but you have learned to look beyond the parade ground and the proclamations. You see the hidden rooms, the locked chests, the faces in the crowd that are never named. You arrive at a low, whitewashed house, perched above the river, its walls thick with heat and secrets. The cook eyes you with suspicion, but the housekeeper herself, brought from Belgium years ago, waves you in. "You're here to help with the new girl," she says, glancing over her shoulder. "Keep your voice down," the master's orders. Inside, the air is close, heavy with the scent of tropical flowers and the acrid tang of burning oil lamps. The girl you've been sent to watch is perhaps 7, skin the color of fresh coffee, hair braided tight and neat. She sits at a wooden table, scribbling French words in a battered notebook. Her hands are quick, her eyes wary. The staff call her Lisette, though that is only for your benefit. Among themselves they use a different name, one that rolls softly in Lingala and sounds nothing like the clipped syllables of Brussels. Lisette's mother is gone dead, the staff say, or perhaps disappeared, sent back to a village in the interior. No one will say for sure. Her father? Here everyone grows suddenly quiet. You see him only once, stepping from a polished carriage, boots caked with red mud. He is tall, with a beard going grey, the infamous Builder King. He spares a single glance for the child and vanishes into the back room, locking the door behind him. You soon learn how Lisette lives, separate from the other children. Her own meals, her own lessons, even her own toys, hand-carved from ebony and bone. She is neither fully staff nor family, never a playmate, never a servant, never once called daughter, yet she is protected. No one is allowed to strike her, and the housekeeper hovers close by, reading aloud from French picture books and teaching her the habits of Belgian table manners. There are gifts, books, a music box, dresses with intricate lace, but there is always a chill, a sense that these tokens are meant to soothe a guilty conscience, not express love. Lisette's world is circumscribed by fear and loneliness. She is not permitted to leave the compound, except in the company of 2 armed guards. Sometimes she stares out through the barred window at the children running free among the cassava fields, her face pressed to the glass. You see her cry only once, after a visiting priest refuses to bless her with the other children, his eyes cold and judgmental. That night, she stays up late, whispering prayers in French and Lingala, clutching a carved ivory cross. As she grows, so does the tension. The other staff avoid her gaze, afraid of both the king's anger and the child's unspoken power. You overhear the housekeeper arguing with the overseer. She has done nothing wrong. She is a child. His child. The overseer shrugs, eyes flinty. She is a problem with a price. You begin to sense how dangerous her position truly is. In a world obsessed with bloodlines, her very existence is both a threat and a shame, a reminder that even kings cannot always control the consequences of their appetites. There are brief moments of happiness. Lisette finds a friend in one of the kitchen girls, a quick-witted teen named Mbali, who teaches her songs in Lingala and lets her taste the forbidden spice of pili-pili peppers. Together, they build tiny boats from palm leaves and set them adrift on the swollen river, whispering wishes for freedom and family. For a while, the laughter returns to Lisette's eyes, but nothing in Leopold's Congo is safe for long. Rumours spread that the king is growing tired of the arrangement, that a new wife is arriving from Belgium, that the household will be reorganized. You notice the housekeeper packing Lisette's belongings into a small trunk, books, dresses, the music box. The king visits more often, his mood darker each time. Once you hear him speaking to the housekeeper in harsh, guttural French. She must never be seen. Do you understand? Never. The decision comes quickly. Lisette is bundled into a carriage before dawn, told only that she is going to the country, and Bolly weeps as they say goodbye. The housekeeper presses a folded handkerchief into Lisette's hand, embroidered with her mother's initials. "Remember who you are," she whispers, hugging her fiercely, "and never let them make you forget." The journey is long, hot, and silent. The carriage passes through villages where no one meets your eyes, past checkpoints where Belgian soldiers wave you through with suspicious glances. At last, you arrive at a small mission on the edge of the forest, run by Belgian nuns. Here, Lisette becomes Louise, and her story is carefully rewritten. An orphan, a ward, a special case in need of Christian charity. Life at the mission is hard, but orderly. The sisters are kind, but wary. Louise works in the garden, helps in the kitchen, sings hymns in the chapel. The other girls are slow to trust her, sensing something different. Her French is too precise, her manners too refined, her sadness too deep, yet she persists. Over time she earns their respect, then their affection. But always, there are questions. Why does she receive parcels from Belgium, containing silk ribbons and chocolates? Why does a stern Belgian official visit every year, reviewing her progress and reporting in hushed tones to the Mother Superior? Why does no one ever visit her on holidays or claim her as kin? You see Louise grow into a striking young woman, tall, poised, with the unmistakable air of someone raised on the edge of power, but denied its comforts. She excels at languages, mastering French, Flemish, and 3 local dialects. She is often sent to translate for new arrivals, her calm authority calming even the wildest disputes. The sisters confide in her, and soon she is managing the mission's accounts, advising on difficult matters, quietly holding the community together. Yet, when word comes that King Leopold is dead, a strange chill settles over the mission. The Belgian official arrives, hands trembling as he delivers a letter to Louise. She reads it alone, face blank. Later you find the letter burned, its ashes scattered among the roses. There is no inheritance, no title, no official acknowledgement, just a stipend, discreetly managed by the Belgian government, to be delivered each month for as long as Louise lives. She is free, in the sense that she is now untethered from the king's whims, but also more alone than ever. The sisters offer her a chance to stay on as a teacher, and she accepts, building a quiet, dignified life out of the ashes of what might have. Some say she died young, taken by fever. Others insist she lived to old age, beloved by generations of Congolese children, her story passed down in secret whispers, the dark child of the White King. You like to think she found peace, that somewhere in the endless green of the Congo, she sang her songs and set her paper boats adrift, each one carrying a wish for freedom that finally came true. Years later, when the world finally learns the full horror of Leopold's reign, Louise's name is absent from every official record. No monuments, no portraits, no family crypt. But you, and those who loved her, remember, in the Congo, every river holds a secret, and every secret has a name, even if only the wind dares speak it aloud. As you leave the mission for the last time, the river gleams gold in the setting sun. You hear children's laughter from the schoolhouse, the sweet ache of loss and hope woven together. Another hidden heir, another life that could have changed everything, but instead, quietly, bravely, chose a different kind of legacy. Your path now curves beneath the relentless Middle Eastern sun, through the walled gardens and high-gloss marbled halls of modern Riyadh. In the 1980s, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia pulses with oil wealth and rumor, a cityscape erupting with mirrored skyscrapers and hidden rooms behind gilded doors. Here, in the shadow of minarets and neon, secrets are not simply whispered, they are paid for, bartered, buried in the desert, and sometimes vanish behind a veil that not even time can lift. Tonight you move through a villa bright with chandeliers and silent with secrets, where the story of a ghost child, a royal girl forbidden to exist, waits just out of sight. You pass through an ornate iron gate at the edge of an affluent Riyadh suburb, the scent of jasmine mingling with the sharper tang of car exhaust and desert heat. The house is large, but not ostentatious by local standards. White walls gleaming beneath the floodlights, palms arching over a manicured drive. The front door opens to a hush, and you are led by a servant, head low, eyes never meeting yours, into a sunken sitting room, thick with Persian carpets and imported velvet cushions. The matriarch greets you with a handshake and a glance that measures more than politeness. She is composed, hair covered by a silk scarf, eyes lined with sorrow and steel. You have been summoned for the comfort of a troubled family, or so you're told. No names are used. You understand at once that this is a household where discretion is not merely a virtue but a condition of survival. In the corner, half hidden by heavy drapes, you notice a young girl, perhaps 12 or 13, slim as a reed, her skin pale and her eyes downcast. She sits at a small table, working quietly at a puzzle, but her movements are tentative, as if she's learned to make herself invisible. She is introduced only as the guest, and it's clear she does not attend school, does not play in the courtyard, and is never spoken of in family gatherings. As days pass, the rhythm of the villa reveals itself. Breakfast on a tray outside the girl's door, a governess who comes and goes without conversation, a doctor's visit at odd hours, always when the rest of the house is empty. You quickly see that the girl's world is bounded by soft walls and silence. She has no phone, no friends, no history but the books stacked beside her bed. You are instructed not to speak to her unless spoken to. You obey, because in this house, the stakes are clear. One word out of place can end more than a career. But even silence cannot hide a child's longing. On rare afternoons, you glimpse her gazing out the window at the world beyond a high garden wall. Boys racing down the street on battered bicycles, neighbors' daughters returning home from school, the distant call of the muezzin echoing over rooftops. Once, you find a notebook filled with careful English and Arabic script, pages of copied poetry, secret notes, and a drawing of a girl with a crown and wings, soaring above the city at night. Bit by bit, the truth emerges in slivers. The girl's mother, you learn, is a private companion to one of the most powerful princes in the kingdom. Her status is complicated, never wife, never official, yet always present. The girl herself is the result of a liaison too delicate for the press, too politically explosive for the court. Her very existence is a threat to the careful balance of royal marriages and tribal alliances. The prince visits often, but never acknowledges the child, speaking only to the matriarch and disappearing before the girl comes downstairs. One night, the girl's mother arrives unexpectedly, face hidden behind a niqab, her steps quick and furtive. You recognize the woman's perfume, rose and oud, the unmistakable scent of wealth and anxiety. She spends hours with her daughter behind closed doors, and when she leaves, you notice the girl is quieter than ever, her eyes rimmed red. You begin to see the careful measures taken to keep her secret. The family's drivers rotate often, the house staff sign new contracts every year, with strict non-disclosure clauses. The girl's official identity, her birth certificate, her passport, lists only the mother's name. No one in the wider family, not even the matriarch's own children, acknowledge her presence. The few times she ventures outside, it is in a tinted car, a scarf wrapped tightly around her hair, accompanied by two older women who speak to her only in formal tones. The price of such secrecy is loneliness. The girl's world is made up of whispers and shadows, of muffled laughter heard through closed doors, of gifts left on her pillow by a father who can never say her name aloud. She develops habits, singing softly to herself at night, pressing her face to the cool marble of the hallway, listening for footsteps that rarely come. You catch her reading history books about queens and warriors, scribbling notes in the margins. How do you rule a kingdom if you cannot even claim your name? Despite her isolation, the girl is fiercely intelligent. Her governess, a stern Englishwoman with a heart soft for lost causes, teaches her mathematics and science, encouraging her to think beyond the villa walls. The girl excels, devouring every lesson, always asking questions that skirt the borders of what can be answered. "Do you believe a secret can be true?" she asks you once, her voice low. You hesitate, not sure if she is speaking about algebra or her own life. A turning point comes one spring, when the prince falls ill. The matriarch's grief is visible, her phone constantly buzzing with news. The girl waits for word in her room, holding tightly to a photograph of her father. As a young man, one of the few mementos she possesses. When the news finally comes that the prince has recovered, the family erupts in quiet relief. But the girl is not permitted to visit or even send a letter. Her pain is private, a wound she must hide, even from herself. As she grows older, the pressure to erase her intensifies. Rumors swirl in the wider family that a problem child exists. The matriarch's sons, ambitious, watchful, begin to visit more frequently, sometimes bringing with them men in suits who linger in the foyer, talking quietly. The girl's world contracts further. She is forbidden even the small pleasures of the garden, her outings now limited to the library and her room. The books she reads become more fantastical, more desperate, stories of girls who vanish, of heroes who win kingdoms with their wit alone. It is during this time that you see the girl's resilience sharpen. She writes stories, tales of a hidden princess, a ghost child who saves a city from disaster. She paints watercolors of the desert at sunset, tucking them under her mattress. She invents games to play with herself, practicing how to greet a queen, how to escape a locked tower, how to walk unnoticed through a crowd. One evening, after a particularly tense day, She finds you in the kitchen, eyes shining with a strange resolve. "If you could choose a name for yourself, what would it be?" she asks. You give her a name, something simple. She nods. "I think I'd like to be Layla. It means night. I think that suits me, don't you?"
You agree, and from then on, she sometimes signs her stories Leela. It becomes her secret, one she shares only with you, a glimmer of freedom in a life built of walls.
As the years pass, change comes slowly. The prince's health fades, and with it, his protection. The matriarch, sensing danger, makes arrangements for the girl to leave. There are phone calls, money exchanged, and finally, a passport under a new name. Layla, daughter of no one. One night, with little warning, she is driven to the airport by a trusted driver. Her only possessions, a suitcase of clothes, a box of books, and a handful of letters from her mother. She boards a plane for Europe, heart pounding, her new life waiting in the unknown. You never see her again, but sometimes, late at night, you find a postcard tucked under the kitchen door, a painting of a night sky, a line of poetry, always unsigned. You know who it is, and you whisper a prayer for the ghost child who became her own legend. The villa grows quiet without her, the memory of her laughter lingering like jasmine on the breeze. The matriarch ages, the staff come and go, but no one speaks of the girl. Her name is never mentioned in family records, her story a secret folded into the fabric of the kingdom. But you remember the quiet strength in her eyes, the bravery in her questions, the hope in her chosen name. You carry her story with you, proof that even in a world built on silence and shame, a hidden child can find a way to write her own destiny. And sometimes, as you walk past the old villa at dusk, you look up at the windows and imagine a girl named Layla standing there, dreaming of stars and freedom, her secret safe in the night. Thunder rattles the windows as you stand outside the gates of a crumbling manor house on the outskirts of wartime Germany. It's 1944, and the country is coming apart at the seams. Smoke stains the horizon. The news from the front grows more desperate by the hour. Inside these walls, you're about to witness another secret birth, one that will be erased before it can ever become a footnote. Because in the chaos of Nazi Germany, even the aristocracy's scandals are swept aside in favor of the Reich's all-consuming need for silence and control. You are summoned in the dead of night to the service entrance of a once grand palace, now blacked out for fear of air raids. The gravel crunches beneath your shoes as you follow a nervous butler down winding halls. Every shadow seems to hide a listening ear. "Quiet," he warns, "and do exactly as the doctor says. We are not to be seen. No one is to know." In a candlelit chamber deep in the servants' wing, a young woman labors. She is the daughter of an old princely family, her eyes feverish with pain and fear. The father you have pieced together is an officer posted at the Eastern Front, a decorated war hero whose only visit home was swift and apparently fruitful, but he is now missing, presumed dead or a prisoner. No one expects his return. The birth is swift, brutal, and silent, but for the woman's bitten-off cries, a nurse, herself from a family of minor nobility, works quickly, expertly, as the old doctor barks orders under his breath. When the baby comes, the room falls into a tense hush. It's a boy, healthy, bawling his arrival into a world that has no place for him. The doctor immediately instructs you to clean the child, swaddle him in plain cloth, and say nothing. "He will not be entered into any book," the nurse whispers. "Not now, not ever." Why the secrecy? The answer is layered, as all things are in Nazi Germany. The family's prestige is a liability and an asset. Their name is protection from many things, but not from the authorities, who see illegitimate births as a stain on Aryan purity, or in some cases a political inconvenience to be erased. And so you become part of a dangerous conspiracy to hide the birth, keep the boy safe, and pray that no one comes asking too many questions. At dawn, the nurse slips away with the baby bundled in her arms. You later learn she takes a circuitous route by bicycle to a nearby village, where a distant cousin agrees to raise the child as her own. In return, the family provides a monthly pension, quietly funneled through intermediaries, the sort of thing that could cost everyone their lives if discovered. The mother remains in the manor, sick with grief and relief, her fate now bound to the secret she keeps. The household closes ranks. The butler destroys all evidence of the birth. Linens are burned, registers left blank. The family's patriarch bribes the local parish priest to alter the parish books and deliver a convincing sermon on discretion. One more lost soul in a time of chaos, he mutters, crossing himself. Better than a dead one. You are instructed to say nothing, to act as if nothing happened, but you can't help noticing the small signs. The way the young mother looks out the window at dusk, searching the empty road, the quiet visits from a priest carrying an envelope of money, the rare letters in a child's hand, passed furtively from the village and hidden beneath her pillow. Life in Germany grows more desperate. Air raids are nightly terrors, the manor's windows shuddering as bombs fall on the city beyond. Food grows scarce. The family's estate is requisitioned, first by German officers, and later, as the tide turns, by Soviet troops. You hear rumors that the nurse's cousin, now called aunt to the little boy, has been forced to flee, taking the child with her into the countryside, surviving on soup and secrecy. Years pass in a haze of uncertainty. The war ends. Germany is divided. The manor falls into further disrepair. Its marble cracked, its gardens choked with weeds. The young woman who gave birth vanishes from local memory, her name absent from the village's gossip. The boy grows up with no knowledge of his origins, believing himself the son of poor farmers. His only clues are stubborn intelligence and a nose that, every old servant remarks, looks suspiciously aristocratic. You hear fragments of his story over the decades. He becomes a mechanic, then a school teacher. He marries, has children of his own. Every so often a distant cousin visits with a heavy envelope, and a story about a debt of honor. Only in middle age does the truth emerge, whispered over coffee and schnapps by a dying aunt. You were born in a palace. Your mother was a princess. Your father was a hero. You were hidden for your own good. The revelation is met with disbelief, then grief, then a sort of wry acceptance. After all, what is blood in a world that has been rebuilt on ruins? He tells no one outside the family. It is better, he decides, to let the past sleep, especially when the present is already so full of ghosts. But he is not alone. All across Germany, after the war, stories surface of lost children, hidden heirs, and families torn apart by secrets and survival. In the chaos of defeat and occupation, birth records are burned, names changed, histories reinvented. Some children, like the boy from the manor, grow up safe but rootless. Others are less lucky, sent to orphanages, lost in the shuffle of refugees, their stories never told at all. You visit the village where the boy grew up, now a sleepy place with a rebuilt church and tidy gardens. The house where he was raised stands empty, its walls painted fresh but its windows dark. In the local inn, old men play cards and reminisce about the strange family who kept to themselves. When you mention the princess, they shake their heads, unwilling or unable to remember. You realize that, for many, forgetting is a survival tactic. The past is a burden, especially when it is full of shame and what-ifs. But for some, those few who choose to chase down the truth, the past is also a kind of inheritance. The boy, now an old man, keeps a battered photograph in a drawer, a woman in a hospital bed, eyes tired but proud, holding a newborn wrapped in faded linen. She was my mother, he says, and she loved me enough to let me go. Occasionally, a researcher or distant cousin contacts him, asking about his heritage, his memories, his claim to some sliver of title or property. He always refuses. That world is gone, he insists. Let the dead stay buried. And yet, you cannot help but feel the weight of what was lost. If the war had not come, if the secrets had not been so closely guarded, perhaps his life and the lives of countless other hidden heirs would have been different. Perhaps the world would have learned their names, celebrated their birthright, and given them the choice denied to so many. You leave Germany with a sense of melancholy, the memory of the crumbling manor and the boy who never knew he was a prince. The fields are green again, the river runs clear, but under the soil, in the stories passed quietly from one generation to the next, the truth waits, patient, silent, impossible to erase. You have learned in all these journeys that royal secrets do not simply vanish. They echo through history, shaping lives in ways both gentle and cruel, and for every hidden heir, for every lost child, There is a story that will never make the history books, but which will live on in the whispered memories of those who bore witness and those who, like you, choose to remember. You step into the parched gold of late summer in Andalusia, Spain, an old land where palaces crackle with ghost stories and the shadows of forgotten dynasties linger in the flicker of every candle. In the winding back alleys of Seville, under tiled roofs and behind ironwork balconies, you find the latest hiding place of a royal bloodline determined to stay hidden. This is the Spain of the 1950s, still reeling from civil war, governed by General Franco's iron fist, and behind closed doors haunted by the enduring whispers of illegitimate Bourbon heirs. Your journey begins in a modest townhouse on Col de la Gloria, not far from the cathedral's soaring spires. The air here is heavy with orange blossom and church incense, mingling with the aroma of roasting chestnuts from a corner vendor. The house is respectable, freshly painted, but just discreet enough to avoid notice from neighbors or prying officials. It is here that a boy named Matteo lives with his aunt and uncle, whose stiff formality never quite softens, even behind closed doors. Matteo is 8 years old, bright-eyed and olive-skinned, with an unruly crop of dark curls. He attends the local Catholic school, where he is a model student, polite, studious, always a little too well-behaved. You see him in the morning, walking to church hand in hand with his aunt, and in the afternoon reading quietly on the shaded patio, never venturing too far. His life is calm, safe, and bounded by routines that seem designed more for secrecy than for comfort. Yet even in this well-ordered world, the cracks show. Matteo has no family photos in his room, only saints and faded postcards of Madrid. He is forbidden to speak to strangers or join the neighborhood boys in soccer. When he asks questions about his parents, his aunt gives a tight-lipped smile and says God has blessed you with a special family. At night, you hear whispers through thin walls, prayers mingled with worry, and sometimes the faint sounds of weeping. It is only when an elderly priest comes to visit that you glimpse the truth. He greets Matteo with uncommon warmth, blessing the boy in Latin and pressing a rosary into his palm. Later, you overhear a hushed argument in the kitchen. You promise to keep him safe, not to suffocate him, the priest hisses. If anyone finds out who he is, the aunt interrupts, fear sharpening her words. We have no choice. Franco's men are everywhere. One wrong word, he disappears. Piece by piece, the story emerges. Matteo is not the couple's nephew, but the son of a Spanish Bourbon prince, an exile from the fallen monarchy, whose brief affair with a young woman from Cordoba led to Matteo's birth. With the monarchy outlawed, and the prince forced into a life of privilege without power, the baby's existence was a threat not just to the Bourbon cause, but to the family's safety. Franco's secret police are notorious for hunting anyone suspected of royalist disappearances. A living, breathing heir is more than a liability. It's a target. And so, the boy is hidden in plain sight, his birth records quietly falsified, his name changed, his future decided for him before he can even spell it. The priest, an old friend of the family, agrees to watch over Matteo, ensuring that the truth stays buried while the child receives the best education possible. The aunt and uncle sacrifice their privacy and in many ways their happiness to play their roles, moving house whenever they feel the gaze of the authorities growing too sharp. Yet, even a carefully tended secret will yearn for sunlight. As Matteo grows, so does his sense that something in his world is off kilter. At school, he is occasionally pulled aside by teachers who treat him with odd deference. He overhears older boys sneering about El Príncipe Fantasma, the ghost prince. Rumors that have somehow seeped even into this quiet quarter. When Franco's troops parade through the city, Matteo feels an odd shiver of fear and curiosity, as if drawn toward the banners and the blare of trumpets by something deeper than patriotism. When he turns 12, Matteo receives a package from an anonymous sender. Inside, a battered volume of Don Quixote, an old medallion engraved with a royal crest, and a note, "You are more than they say." The handwriting is unfamiliar, but the aunt goes pale when she sees it, and the uncle spends the night burning the wrappings in the fireplace. For weeks afterward, they do not let Matteo out of their sight. Despite their efforts, word spreads. Matteo's teachers whisper about his resemblance to an exiled duke in France. The priest becomes more cautious, visiting at odd hours and speaking only in riddles. At Mass, the family sits in the back pew, slipping out before the final hymn. You notice men in grey coats, sometimes lingering at the corner cafe, watching the house over their newspapers. The uncle grows more anxious, triple locking the doors and sending Matteo on endless errands to keep him indoors. One summer evening, a stranger arrives at the house, a gentle woman with soft hands and sorrowful eyes, who claims to be a distant cousin. She spends hours with Matteo in the garden, telling stories of castles and heroes, sketching his portrait in charcoal. When she leaves, she presses a small envelope into his palm. Inside are clippings from foreign newspapers, a photo of a prince, a report of an exiled family, and the words, "We have not forgotten." It is the first time Matteo sees his father's face. He hides the envelope beneath his mattress and sleeps poorly for weeks, dreams swirling with knights and soldiers, banished kings and hidden heirs. At 16, Matteo's life changes again. Franco's regime grows bolder, and purges of suspected monarchists sweep the city. The priest warns the family that they must leave Seville for Madrid, where the population is large enough to offer anonymity. The move is harrowing. Boxes packed in the dead of night, goodbyes whispered rather than spoken, prayers muttered on the train north. In Madrid, Matteo is enrolled in a new school under yet another name. The family's resources are stretched to the breaking point, but the uncle insists it is worth it. "So long as you are safe," he says, "we can bear anything." In Madrid, Matteo flourishes quietly. He wins scholarships, reads voraciously, and attracts the attention of professors who notice his intelligence and his uncanny ability to charm anyone, even the most rigid bureaucrats. But he never makes close friends, never brings anyone home. The fear of discovery is always there, a silent companion at every table. The years pass. Franco's grip on Spain loosens, and talk of restoring the monarchy stirs in hidden corners. Matteo is now a young man, tall and self-assured, with a gaze that combines the dignity of his royal ancestors and the watchfulness of a fugitive. The priest, now frail and retired, tells him the full story. His birthright, the dangers he faced, the sacrifices made for him. "You are a prince," he says, "but you owe your life to the love of ordinary people." When Franco dies, Spain enters a new era. The monarchy is restored, but the old king Matteo's grandfather remains in exile, and Matteo's father, broken by years of separation, refuses to return. For a moment, there is hope that Matteo's secret might be revealed, that he could claim a place at court, even if only as a distant cousin. But the world is changing too quickly, and the royal family's return is a delicate balancing act. No room for inconvenient heirs. Matteo chooses to remain in the shadows, completing his studies and eventually becoming a professor of history at a university in Barcelona. He specializes in the stories of lost dynasties and hidden heirs, teaching his students the importance of memory, silence, and survival. He marries, raises a family, and keeps his secret, sharing it only with his children in the quiet hours before dawn. On the rare occasions when distant relatives visit from France, they exchange knowing glances and cryptic toasts. Matteo's story becomes family legend, a whispered reminder that blood and loyalty do not always march together, and that sometimes the greatest acts of courage are the quietest ones. You leave Spain with the scent of orange blossoms and the memory of a hidden prince, his story woven into the fabric of a nation still wrestling with its past. You know now that history is not only written by kings and conquerors, but by those who keep the secrets that make survival possible. Matteo's legacy is not a throne or a crown, but a life quietly, bravely. You find yourself now in the faded elegance of a Caribbean mansion, its white columns streaked with salt and thyme, the shutters rattling softly in the warm wind. This is early 20th century Jamaica, a land of rum and revolution, planters and poets, where the old colonial order is being shaken by tides that reach all the way to Buckingham Palace. For here, tucked among the hibiscus and blue maho, is another secret royal heir, one whose story is wound through empire, colour lines, and the treacherous currency of discretion. You're welcomed at the side door by the cook, who wipes her hands on her apron and nods you inside with a conspiratorial glance. "Keep your eyes open but your mouth shut," she murmurs. The master of the house is a British baronet, a widower grown paunchy and short-tempered in the sticky heat. But the real power here is the mistress, Miss Violet, a tall, graceful woman whose origins are the subject of endless local speculation. Miss Violet's daughter, Estelle, is 11 years old. She moves through the airy rooms like a sunbeam, quick, clever, never quite still. Her skin is a warm golden brown. Her eyes are bright green flecked with amber. There's something undeniably regal about her bearing. The way she walks, the tilt of her chin, the laugh that makes everyone pause to listen. The servants adore her, the white neighbours, less so. They call her the baronet's ward, but the knowing looks say more than the words ever could. Estelle is the product of a royal liaison, rarely spoken of, above a whisper. The baronet, during a trip to London in his youth, had been a young aide at a garden party where a certain dashing prince, the Duke of Clarence, son of the Prince of Wales, paid rather too much attention to Violet than a lady's maid in a visiting noblewoman's retinue. By the time Violet realized her condition, the prince had sailed for India, and the baronet, besotted and ambitious, offered her protection and a passage to Jamaica on one condition, that the true father would never be spoken of, not even to the child. So Violet raised Estelle as her own, in a mansion filled with half-truths and silent bargains. The baronet, for all his bluster, never acknowledged Estelle as his daughter, but provided her with a private tutor, new dresses from England, and a place at his table, so long as she never called him papa. For Estelle, the truth was a shifting shadow. She learned not to ask about her father, to ignore the averted eyes of the British guests, to smile brightly even when the local gossips circled like vultures. As Estelle grows, the household's secret grows harder to keep. The baronet's drinking increases, and with it, his rages. At times he refers to Estelle as that girl, yet in the next breath, he presses a coin into her palm and tells her to buy herself sweets. The tension is a living thing. You see it in the way Violet stands, always between Estelle and the world, ready to shield her daughter from the cruelties of race, class, and legitimacy. The local community knows more than it says. The black and brown families of Kingston treat Estelle with a strange mixture of respect and wariness. She is not quite one of us, but neither is she accepted by the British set. When she attends church, the vicar gives her special lessons in the back pews, reciting scripture in the Queen's English and teaching her the sort of table manners one might need in a palace. At market, old women press talismans into her hand and whisper, "You walk with angels, little one." But always, there is the reminder, in Jamaica, secrets can be as dangerous as hurricanes. The turning point comes when a letter arrives from London, thick with crests and stamps. The baronet reads it at breakfast, his face flushing red, then white. He storms from the table, locking himself in his study for hours. Violet retrieves the letter, her hands shaking. That night, after Estelle is in bed, she reads the contents to you and the cook by candlelight. A distant royal relative has died, and with him, the last connection to Estelle's real father. There are hints in the letter, requests for silence, offers of continued support, warnings about the consequences of scandal should the family story ever be leaked to the press. Violet knows what this means. The funds that have arrived like clockwork each quarter, disguised as charitable endowments, may soon dry up. The baronet's fortunes are fading, and now with the British Crown nervous about any more colonial surprises, the pressure to keep Estelle hidden is stronger than ever. Life tightens. Estelle's tutor is dismissed. Her trips to town become rare. The baronet grows more irritable, blaming Violet for every setback. Yet Estelle refuses to shrink. She reads every book in the house, begins writing poems of her own, and takes to playing the old piano in the evenings, the notes floating out into the humid night. The staff begin to share her poems among themselves, marveling at the girl's gifts. One day a visiting bishop hears her recite, and afterward tells Violet she has the blood of kings. One day the world will know it. Meanwhile, the political winds in Jamaica are shifting. The call for independence grows louder, and with it, the scrutiny of colonial families intensifies. The baronet is summoned to a meeting with the new governor, who pointedly asks after his household. He returns shaken, ordering that Estelle not leave the grounds and that Violet remind her who feeds her. That night, Violet tells Estelle the truth for the first time. Your father was a prince, not the sort that rides in on a white horse, but a real one, the kind whose love comes with a price. Estelle is stunned, but not broken. She sits silently for hours, processing, then calmly tells her mother, "Then I'll be my own princess." It's the answer of a child who has known only ambiguity, who has learned that love and pain often walk hand in hand. Over the next year, as Jamaica edges toward independence, the family's fortunes crumble. The baronet dies suddenly, his debts eclipsing his assets. The estate is seized, and Violet and Estelle are forced to move to a small cottage at the edge of town, living off Violet's skills as a seamstress. Yet in this new life, Estelle blooms. Freed from the weight of secrecy in the manor's cold halls, she makes friends among her neighbours, volunteers at the church school, and publishes her poetry in the local newspaper under a pseudonym. As Jamaica celebrates its first day of independence, Estelle is chosen to recite a poem at the flag-raising ceremony. She stands before a crowd of thousands, her words ringing out over the city, a voice both proud and tender, rooted in her land and her lineage. In the audience, Violet weeps with pride, knowing that her daughter, once a secret meant to be erased, is now a symbol of the island's future. Years later, Estelle's poetry becomes celebrated across the Caribbean. She travels, speaks, teaches, but never leaves Jamaica for long. She tells her story to those she trusts, always ending with the same lesson: you are more than your blood. You are what you choose to become. You leave the island with the sound of her laughter echoing across the sea breeze, the sense that a royal secret, once buried, has blossomed into something free and strong. Estelle's legacy is not in crowns or titles, but in the songs she sang and the courage she passed on. A reminder that sometimes the best way to be royal is to live your truth, even when the world would rather you disappear. Now you drift to the edge of the modern world, into the 21st century, where secrets slip and slide through digital wires and palaces are ringed not by moats, but by paparazzi, NDAs, and relentless, prying screens. This is London, city of double-decker buses and constant drizzle, of royal headlines splashed across breakfast tables and trending hashtags that can ruin reputations before the kettle is even boiled. Here, behind the gleaming gates of Kensington or the cool, glassy penthouses of Mayfair, you trace the newest kind of hidden heir, a child born in the media age, whose very existence is a secret kept by contract Kemption and the exhausted hope that, just this once, silence might stick. You find yourself in a quiet neighbourhood, all Range Rovers and well-tended hedges. The house in question is large but utterly unremarkable from the outside. Just another 5-bedroom box in a city full of quiet luxury. You're welcomed at the side door by a woman in a crisp suit, a family assistant, who offers you tea and a list of rules before you've even taken off your coat. No cameras, no phones, no notes, no questions. And absolutely under no circumstances are you to speak about the child. It doesn't take long to realize this household is operating under a level of discretion bordering on paranoia. You notice extra locks on doors, windows that never open more than a crack, and a constant parade of nannies, tutors, and delivery drivers who all have the same look: polite, distant, and just a little bit haunted. The household's center of gravity is a boy of about 9, sandy-haired, tall for his age, with piercing blue eyes and a face that would look right at home in an oil portrait in any gallery in England. His name, to you and the staff, is Jamie. But that's only the name on the carefully managed school forms. The birthday cards sent from Auntie Rachel, the soccer jersey that always seems just a size too big. Jamie's world is one of routines and rotations. Private lessons, home-cooked meals, long walks in the park with the assistant trailing behind, always vigilant. He's bright, good-humoured, and already far too skilled at keeping secrets for a child his age. The family story is, on the surface, almost ordinary. A working mother who travels for consulting, a father abroad, lots of family friends who show up for Christmas but never linger too long. But you're not fooled. You see the way Jamie is never photographed at school events, never mentioned in the PTA newsletter, never appears in any public setting without a careful buffer of adults. He has a habit of looking over his shoulder, of hesitating before he speaks, as if he's been trained, since birth, to watch for invisible eyes. At first, the staff are tight-lipped, but time and tea have a way of loosening tongues. One evening, the housekeeper tells you, voice low, his mum was a rising star, a charity CEO, always around the royals. Then suddenly, she's gone quiet, moves here, gets these security details, never any talk of a dad, not to us. The cook adds, the lady from the palace comes on Thursdays, never stays for tea, but always brings Jamie a new book. Must be someone important. As you piece it together, a pattern emerges. Jamie's mother is a commoner, with an impeccable record, intelligent, ambitious, just the sort of woman the public loves to imagine might catch the eye of a prince. There was a period of speculation in the press, a handful of photos, a dinner party sighting, but then, like magic, the story vanished. The palace issued a bland denial, and the tabloids, for once, moved on. But not before some very sharp lawyers made sure that any trace of scandal or suggestion of an heir was scrubbed clean from the record. Yet, Jamie's features are impossible to ignore. The blue eyes, the crooked grin, the exact turn of the chin when he's thinking hard. If you've seen enough royal portraits, you'd know at once. And then there's the visits. Once a month, a black car with diplomatic plates pulls up to the curb. Jamie is whisked away for a weekend, sometimes to the country, sometimes to a flat in a discreet part of town. He returns with new stories, odd souvenirs, and a look of quiet longing he never quite shakes. His mother, for her part, is loving, but always distracted. You catch her staring out the window late at night, phone glowing in her hand, as if waiting for a message that never quite comes. She hugs Jamie tightly before every visit, and when he returns, she never asks questions, just serves his favorite pudding and tucks him in with a kiss on the forehead. The burden of secrecy shapes Jamie's world in ways both big and small. He excels at his studies, learns French and fencing, rides horses at a stable outside the city. He asks clever questions but knows not to ask the ones that matter most. Who is my father, really? Why don't I have cousins over for tea? Why do we have two family trees, one for school projects, and one, tucked in a desk drawer, filled with names that sound awfully familiar from the news? Jamie's only true confidant is the family's aging dog Henry, who sleeps at the foot of his bed and listens patiently to all his whispered dreams. Some nights, you pass Jamie's door and hear him reciting names to the dog, names he's not supposed to know, stories he's pieced together from eavesdropped conversations and half-remembered holidays. Maybe one day, he tells Henry, I'll get to have my own story. Sometimes the pressure cracks. Jamie comes home from school, teary-eyed, clutching a crumpled note. Someone in his class made a joke about the secret prince, and though the teacher quickly shut it down, Jamie knows it's not just a game. That evening, his mother calls a number from a locked notebook. Within an hour, the sleek woman in a palace lanyard is at the door. Soothing words and careful reassurances. Just be normal, she says. It's better that way. But you can see the cost in the set of Jamie's shoulders, the way he hugs Henry a little tighter that night. And yet, life goes on. Jamie grows, learns, adapts. The staff rotate out, new faces arrive, but the rules remain the same. The world outside races ahead, politicians fall, celebrities rise and fall, and the tabloids chase their stories. Jamie watches it all from the safety of the kitchen window, making up his own headlines in his head. Sometimes when he's feeling bold, he writes them down. Secret prince wins spelling bee. Royal hero saves the day. He laughs, but you can hear the longing underneath. As Jamie turns 16, a quiet shift occurs. The palace car comes more often. His weekends away turn into short trips abroad. Paris, Rome, always carefully chaperoned, always returning with new languages on his tongue, and a polite, distant air. His mother becomes more anxious, taking long walks at dusk, her phone never far from reach. You overhear hushed arguments behind closed doors, about money, about future plans, about what he'll do when he turns 18. On his 17th birthday, Jamie receives an envelope, hand-delivered, sealed with the royal crest. Inside is a letter, not a declaration, not a confession, but an offer. The palace is prepared to fund his education anywhere in the world, with certain conditions: no press, no memoirs, no political statements. He is to live as a private citizen, respected, comfortable, but invisible. The choice is his, but the message is clear: safety and anonymity, or risk everything for a place in the light. Jamie takes time to decide. He consults no one except his mother, and of course, Henry the dog. In the end, he chooses freedom on his own terms. A quiet university abroad, a field of study that allows him to travel, to write, to see the world without ever stepping onto a balcony or waving to a crowd. The palace keeps its promise. The headlines never come, but every year, a Christmas card arrives from an old family friend, and Jamie, now a man, smiles at the memory of the life he was allowed to choose. The story lingers, though, on message boards, in family trees, in the knowing glances exchanged at certain garden parties in London. Those who know never say. Those who wonder never learn the full truth. And James, he lives a life both ordinary and extraordinary, a testament to a new kind of royalty, one that survives not in the glare of history, but in the quiet courage of living unseen. As you slip from the last secret corridor, the night air cools, and the world grows soft around the edges. The hidden heirs, the forgotten children, the royal lives lost between the lines. Each story is a thread woven into the vast, quiet tapestry of history. The palace is empty, the lights dim, but you find yourself remembering the gentle weight of all those secrets, kept for love or duty, for safety or shame. Now the pace slows. You can almost hear the hush of slippers on marble, the distant laughter of a child in a sunlit garden, the closing notes of a lullaby sung in a dozen different tongues. All those hidden heirs, whether in golden halls, walled courtyards, or suburban London kitchens, were real, their dreams as sharp and bright as any crown. Some lived in shadow, others grew bold enough to step into the dawn, most simply carried on, quietly shaping their worlds in ways that history books will never truly capture. So breathe deep, let your mind soften and settle. If you listen, you might still catch a whisper, a promise kept, a name never spoken, a story gently handed down through generations. In the soft darkness, know that even secrets, especially royal ones, can carry hope, healing, and the faint golden glow of possibility. And now, as the world grows still, rest easy. The secrets are safe for tonight, and morning will bring new stories, new light. Sleep well, royal dreamer.